Hello, you are listening to the Lookouts 40k podcast. It is episode 14, which means only one thing. It's the Joe Show. Yes, it's all about me. And rightfully so. You did have me last week, so it's just all me. All me. I'd like to say it was only me, but I do have my glamorous assistants. We have Dan. You're in the room.
I'm not in the room, Joe. I'm definitely not in the room, but I am talking to you via the medium by which we communicate. Yeah, whichever works.
Yeah, but we could associate this as like a chat room, like they used to have in the 90s, like on MSN.
All right, fine. We are in an MSN chat room right now.
Yeah.
And I am present within said room and its virtual confines within the internet.
What was your email address for MSN?
Now there's a question. I can't exactly remember. It would have been something really awful.
Mine was Moosefighter9.
There you go.
I don't know, but
surely that email address is just carried on existing and has now become like an Outlook email address that anyone could steal and use in your name.
Well, I haven't accessed it since about 2003.
Yeah,
when did? Yeah.
Do you not see my point then about how someone could use it to steal a little piece of your identity?
Well, to be honest, they could only improve it.
Well, that's true. Maybe they'll make you some money.
Yeah, I can only hope.
That would be very nice of them.
Okay, and then my other glamorous assistant in a sparkly white dress is Phil.
Hello. I do not have a sparkly white dress.
Oh.
Are you going to supply me one?
Yes. All assistants must have dresses and be open to the possibility of being put into a box and cut in half.
Oh, I can do that.
Good. And I want you to look nice whilst you're doing it. And,
I wouldn't have it any other way.
But shave your head and keep the beard like an American trucker.
Okay, why do I need to shave my hair?
That's how I like it.
Okay.
Yeah. I want the lights of the theatre to shine off your greased up head.
Oh, great.
He's getting into some very exacting situations here.
That's how I work. I like to create a picture for the listeners. I want them to feel like they're front row at the Apollo.
I just worry that you've spent probably a little bit too much time thinking about that scenario.
I've got a lot of time on my hands. Like when you drive to and from work and you're stuck in traffic for a long time, I'm like, Phil, he'd look good in the dress with a shaved head. What situation can I put him in? And then it just snowballs from there. Yeah. Your stunned silence tells me everything.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I don't know where to go from here.
He's very good at this, isn't he? I'm so glad we're letting him.
I'm terrible. Yeah, this is the problem. You paid the ticket. You're on the ride. It's no holds barred. It's probably creepy, weird talk.
It's probably worth stating for anyone who's listening to this the first time. This isn't the normal format. So we're just throwing it out there. Joe wasn't here last week, so now we've called this the Joe Show. But before we start talking about the fact it's the Joe Show, do you not have one more glamorous assistant to introduce in this instance?
I do. The best of them, who I shall name African Sunset, but also Tim. Say hello, Tim.
Hello. I feel like I would like a very shimmery dress, please, Joe.
Yes, auburn and
sequins.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
I'm done.
And there's spotlights like just on you all the time.
I can handle this. I'm okay with this.
I'll bring. Right, Tim's down with my weird creepiness. Why aren't you? I hope the listeners are.
I didn't say I wasn't down with your weird creepiness. I'm just clarifying what's going on here, or at least attempting to.
I think Joe's trying to pimp us out and make money through us somehow by being glamorous assistants, so we can get that sweet Twitch stream money.
Twitch stream money? You've been doing Twitch streams lately, Joe?
Yep. So what I've done basically is I've sold my weird creepiness, and I basically have cardboard cutouts of you guys and doing a creepy Cirque du Soleil-esque show on Twitch.
I demand to be on a trapeze. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's in my contract.
And that's how I live my evenings when I'm not talking to you guys. Anyway,
how are you feeling about this, Phil? You seem very quiet about the whole situation.
Well, I'm sort of just waiting for him to get on with the rest of the intro because it's taking ages.
Anyway.
Well, obviously Joe's researched and understands what we're actually going to be talking about today, right? So he can introduce all the individual topics like a hard-working professional.
Yep, because I wasn't here for the beginning.
You got the show notes, though, right? I put them on the group chat.
Oh, who does that research? Jesus. It's not what the people come for. Right.
I mean, if you were to hazard a guess, what are we going to talk about first?
I'm going to talk about me, because that's why people are here.
That's not why people are here. No, I feel like you've done enough talking about you right now. I feel like people want to hear about something a little bit more productive and Warhammer 40,000 themed.
Alright then. We'll do a little bit of someone else, and I'm assuming, because they were released recently, Genestealer Cult.
So you want to open with Genestealer Cult?
Yeah, the creepy little mole people. That's what it's all about.
So section 1, Genestealer Cult.
Yeah.
Then what? What are we going to talk about next?
Oh, I don't know. Me?
No, again. Let's be clear. Although this is the Joe Show and you are introducing every topic and present throughout.
Oh my god.
I feel like we should have top 10 facts of Joe.
Top 10 facts about Joe.
And
We
then
got all that
segment 2.
We found out about how he's got 5 dads and that, they all wanted to get rid of him, so they put him in Games Workshop.
Oh, brutal.
You make it sound like Game of Thrones. Child.
Anyone who's listened to the previous 13 episodes, bar the ones where he wasn't here, so episodes 7 and 13 as it happens, have pieced together a fantastic version of Joe. And thankfully, he just gave them his, absent email address, so they've got everything they need now.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun. Yeah. I want to do a little piece.
Do you?
Yeah.
Go on then, what's it about?
I want to talk about dice. The
You want to talk about dice?
Cubes that we toss about willy-nilly in game.
Sounds very enthralling.
Exactly.
I'll tell you what, it is going to be a mind bender. Just you wait.
Okay.
I think he's got a valid point.
I mean, it's not without... It just wasn't in the show notes, Joe. We sent the whole thing. We agreed.
The problem is that, as I explained to you before, I've got a new phone. And when it got to the time of recording, I was like, why is no one calling me? No one cares. It's my show. They don't want to involve me. What's going on?
Okay.
I'm going to make up my own show notes then.
Yeah.
I have my own podcast.
20 minutes going, rudeness. And then I realised I hadn't installed Skype on my phone. So...
Oh, God.
I've got Skype on my phone, and good. But the problem is now, is that all the messages from before, me just turning up here,
okay.
I don't have.
Oh, brilliant. Shall I enlighten you, Joe, and say what the other topics of discussion were going to be?
Yeah, do it. Chuck
right,
him in there.
You're right, we're going to talk about Genestealer Cult, and then obviously, as it is your show, we'll do as commanded, and you can talk about dice. Do you need anyone to contribute to that, or are you just going to talk by yourself on that topic?
Right, we're going to have a discussion.
Oh, okay. We're going to ramble about dice.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right. We were also going to talk about, and again, Joe, obviously with your permission, we were going to talk about the new models for the Chaos Space Marines and Space Marine Rangers.
Definitely, because I can do some rustling in the background, painting some test ones for those. So I'm all prepared for that.
Well, you've got to kind of host all these things, Joe. You've got to be more on it.
Oh, all right.
I know it's hard, mate. This is what happens, you see. When you take control, when you take the lead position, this is what occurs.
All right, then.
And then there's that. And we were also... Oh, sorry.
And what's next?
Well, no, come on. What was next? There was one last thing. Something we all did recently.
Oh, the tournament that we all went to. The Brawlentines Brawl game day.
Brawlentines Day Massacre, yeah.
That's the one. At Entoyment Poole.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, let's get it on. Get this podcast done. Genestealer Cult. Go.
Is that it?
Transitional noises.
Transitional noises, even Tim knows.
Oh my god. Transitional noises. Everyone. This is a group effort. 3, 2, 1. And, as previously stated, we're now going to talk about Genestealer Cult. I, as usual, have prepared in zero way, but I know what we're going to do. Tim is in control of this situation because he has the book in his hands, like someone who is prepared.
It's also worth highlighting that I also have the book in my hands.
Oh, you ruined my thing!
Oh, sorry.
I was going to do prepared positions and everything. See? Prepared positions, Genestealer Cults, blips. It was all a thing.
I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't trust you. I will not make that mistake again. I will never interrupt you.
No, do it, please, because I'll just ramble and it will all be ruined and we'll lose all 3 listeners and it'll be terrible.
I think we've got a few more listeners like that. Actually, at some point, we should probably shout out our good friend, Mr. Toke, who always says lovely things about us and probably deserves a shout-out.
Yeah.
He was nice. He said some nice things even about the last episode, which I felt was one of our weakest ones. So, you know, thank you for that. Very kind.
Yeah.
Maybe he should come on here once and we could make it his show rather than you.
Yep. Well, what we'll do is we'll do it all together. We'll get him over into England and we'll create like a weird... We'll draw like a chaos symbol on the floor, the 8-pointed star. He can stand in the middle with a microphone because people are going to need to hear it. We basically just sit on the stars. We're going to have to get some more people involved, and we just ask him questions for like 2 hours.
There we go. With a goal towards summoning some kind of demon, I assume.
Yeah.
Also, as well, it's worth highlighting that I've made some bold assumptions about the gender of this individual. I assumed he. I could be wrong. Could be a she. Could be somewhere in between. And that's not intended to be derogatory when I say that. I'm just covering all bases. So apologies if I assumed wrong. And if I am right, apologies for assuming it would be any other way. That probably wasn't a very sensible way of approaching things. But it needed addressing.
Yeah. It's still early days. We're going to make these mistakes.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
You got to make mistakes to learn from them. So, anyway, Tim is in the driving seat of this situation because he has the book. And he's going to tell us his favourite things about the book. And then myself, Dan, and Phil are going to pick one thing, excuse me, that we love about the book. Or we like, not necessarily love. Phil could be nonchalant about the whole thing.
I mean, again, saying I wasn't going to interrupt, but I feel like we just discussed this, that we just said Tim was going to talk us through the things that he liked, and none of us were going to talk about anything, because, as we've acknowledged, you don't have the book, Phil doesn't have the book. We're just going to let Tim talk, and we're going to comment on what he says.
All right then, Tim.
I mean, was that right, Phil?
I mean, I guess.
Phil's there.
Have you already lost all hope for the hour in front of us?
I'm a bit like, I think this Joe show is going to be a one-time special, so the listeners make the most of it lasts.
Yeah.
I'm completely with you, mate. I think. But they wanted it. They're getting it. This is why This is why you can't have nice things.
Yeah. Often the dream is better than reality, as they say.
Nonetheless, when you're ready, Tim.
Yeah.
How do I start from that? Hello. Welcome to the Joe Show and this lovely segment of Genestealer Cults, as we've numerously mentioned already. Where to begin? I guess a good place to start would be the Cult Ambush rules, and whether or not it's allowed from the first turn or not. That would be a good point of discussion. So,
what's allowed from the first turn? I thought you could cult ambush from the first turn. That's very explicitly stated.
Well, I think you can, but I reckon in some match plays events, until we get an FAQ on it, some people would argue it.
Why don't you describe the rule, Tim, and explain why you're confused?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm confused. I think it's totally legit and should be allowed. But anyway, so it says, during deployment, you can set up this unit in ambush instead of on the battlefield. If the unit has the infantry or biker keyword, you can either set it up in ambush or underground instead of on the battlefield. So when we go into the next bit, it then states, when you set up a unit underground, it can emerge at the end of your movement phase. Set up the unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any model. So to me, that means you can do that from turn 1. Because they haven't specifically stated, like, it's from turn 2, taking into account the previous FAQs and erratas.
Well, so, not to get into the mix with this stuff, so I would say that specific interpretation of the rule, or that specific aspect of the rule, has no ambiguity around it in terms of what the intent is for match play. Now, obviously, when you read these rules, you've got to obviously remember that these rules are written to apply across all 3 systems of play. So within open play and narrative play, sure, you could do that turn 1. But if you read the tactical reserves within the Big FAQ 2 2018, it states this exact example, and that these things cannot come in within 9 until the end of the movement phase of turn 2 or turn 3, as described. So that specific instance, I 100% know, based on what I can read here and what I see here, that's a turn 2 instance. I suppose what's interesting is how do the blips work, in the sense that the blip rules specifically state that they can only come in, or rather they have to either be revealed at the start of their movement phase or at the end of your opponent's movement phase. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. And then also what's doubly interesting is whether or not with the blip rule you're able to actually put your entire army into reserves on the simple basis that this somewhat overrides the tactical reserves conundrum. So that's the thing that's interesting.
Yeah, very true. But the reason the sort of cult ambush from underground, they stated that on the Warhammer community website that when they were coming up with these rules of the whole tactical reserve and everything can't arrive from deep strike in turn 1, they said, don't worry, Genestealer Cult guys, you'll be fine, or something to that effect.
Aren't the blips? The blips are only for in your deployment zone, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think that's how they kind of get around it. So they're using the rules from the old FAQ to run this one, because I guess they assume that no one is going to be in your deployment zone turn 1.
Well, you would hope.
Yeah.
Well, no,
and you can't go within 9 inches of them either, can you?
No.
Turn 1.
No.
No, you can't end your movement phase within 9 inches of a blip. You can still move across them as long as you're not ending within 9. At least that's my assertion based on what I'm seeing here. Yeah. I think the interesting tactical nuance for this is, I guess, if it is that your entire army can go into this blip form, what kind of opportunities that opens up for you, and whether or not that is actually tactically very good. The other question I also had is, would you count these units as being represented by blips as coming in from reserves when they're revealed, and how would that then interact with stratagems like Forewarned for the Elder, or Auspex Scan for the various Space Marines? Because if you were to go first as a Space Marine player and could run your models down the other side of the board, somehow, some way, I don't know how exactly you might achieve that. Maybe it's a death company that has double moved at the start and now is within 12 of a handful of these blips. When those blips are revealed, would that then allow them to trigger the Auspex Scan? In the case of Forewarned, it's a much easier thing because you only have to be within 6 of a Farseer. So yeah, that's another fantastic thing that an elder player could potentially do to you, because in the opening turn they're like, cool, I'm going to put myself where I want to be, and then as soon as you reveal something, I'm going to blow it away because fun.
So when you deep strike something, or you put something in deep strike reserve, doesn't the rule say that you put it at the start of the game, you put it into reserve?
Yeah, which is the exact same for this though.
Oh, so it actually says it's going into reserve.
I was going to say, when you put them on the board, doesn't it specifically say they're coming from reserve?
I don't think it does. When you set up a unit in ambush, you can place it anywhere on the battlefield within your deployment zone. Blah de blah de blah. It doesn't state that it's come from reserve.
But it uses the same wording that say
yes.
So if you're a Space Marine captain with a jump pack and you want to be put into what was historically called Deep Strike Reserve, but now is called Descend from the Heavens, or whatever the heck it's called, the wording is the same, and as much as you put them into this type of deployment, you have not put them on the board because they're going to arrive using this special rule. And in the case of when they emerge from underground, that is the same as any tactical reserve type situation. The blips are slightly different because they are technically represented on the board, but they aren't actually on the board. So is that them coming in from reserves or not?
Or is that them just being placed there?
Yeah, which is the same.
I'd say that they weren't coming in reserve because although you can choose which units go where, those positions are locked. So the benefit from coming from reserve is that you get to choose anywhere on the table and put yourself 9 inches away. Whereas if you've got the blips, you can put down whatever unit you want on that blip, but it has to go in that locked position.
There are stratagems to move them around. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the thing is as well, is you can move the stratagems around, but you can also be you can also move within 6 of the location of the blip, or at least the unit needs to be contained within 6. Now, as I understand it, looking at this here, you can't leave the confines of your deployment zone with that move, so you can't come out within 1 and then go, great, I'm 6 inches further ahead, and then I'm moving, and then I'm doing that. Or at least I don't think so. But you do get a degree of tactical flexibility, as if you were coming in from reserve. So it's close. It's not the same, and that's why it needs just a little bit of clarification, I think, because, again, as an elder player who loves a scatterbike and always has a Farseer within 6 of said scatterbikes, this is probably a bit of a disadvantage to your Genestealer Cult players, because you know that in their movement phase you're going to get a chance to shoot them before they can even do anything, which is slightly bothersome for them.
You can only do that once though, right? Because it's a stratagem.
Per phase, yeah.
So, same with Auspex scan.
Yes.
With the forewarning, the Eldar stratagem, does that happen immediately when you put a unit down or at the end of the turn?
Immediately when a unit's placed.
Right, okay. Because
Does
otherwise...
it specify the phase?
No, it's just whenever something arrives. Well, it would always happen in the movement phase anyway, because that's when things arrive.
Well, no, because if the Genestealer Cult player goes second, you reveal the blips in your opponent's shooting phase, don't you?
No, at the end of the movement phase.
Oh, it's at the end of the movement phase.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting as well, and although it doesn't affect match play, so isn't really worth talking about in any great way, if you were playing a narrative game or you were playing an open game, end of movement phase would be when, say, something else from your army can come in. So if you were playing in a normal narrative game, you're within your rights to have a unit deploy at the end of your movement phase, which is also when these blips trigger. So which goes first is another question that, again, they've not overly addressed, because I think, again, as much as they always talk about the free systems, it's fairly clear that, you know, they're only overly interested in match play in terms of clarifying rules, but at the same time...
no, they have clarified that. It's if 2 actions happen simultaneously, the controlling player gets to decide. So if they're both at the end of the movement phase, and it's my go, and I get to deep strike something, I can elect to do the blips first or deep strike my unit in.
Oh, cool. That's good. I think, again, I was going to finish that sentence by saying it doesn't necessarily matter in that type of play, because the assertion should be that you're not playing that super competitively, and as such you should be able to come to an agreement such as what you've just said, but obviously it's in the rules, so that's A-OK.
So do we think this is going to be a lovely tactical edge, considering that some people think they win and lose the game from just the deployment phase alone?
I think a very skilled player can win with it. It gives you the ability to... I'd say if I was the Genestealer Cult player, I'd always go second, because your opponent can't shoot at you because you haven't got any units on the table, and your opponent's either going to waste their first turn and not move and be defensive, or they're going to move out to claim objectives and hold ground, and then you can just place your units down accordingly.
I would actually do it the other way around. I would try and go first, because that means you've got to deploy first, right? And in which case you just put blips down. And then your opponent who's trying to counter your deployment can't, because you've just put a bunch of blips down. And then you get the benefit of still revealing it to then counter his deployment and getting to go first. So you basically negate any negative from the deployment phase.
That's the way I would probably do it, just because there's no negatives for turning up from, being revealed from an ambush marker. Like, you don't count as having moved. So you can still shoot all your heavy weapons and stuff and not suffer any minuses or anything like that, which is quite nice. Also, there's quite a few things like that in the Codex.
Also, I was just reading the entirety of the rule. It states that they are arriving from reinforcements, so actually you can specs and shoot them with stratagems. Yeah,
I mean, I assume it's going to be FAQ'd, but my assumption is it overrides the beta rule in terms of this happens from turn 1, because the blips have to be revealed from turn 1, otherwise there'd be a conflict. So in that respect, that bit overrides the beta rule, but it is still classed as being from reinforcements.
Yeah.
So you can use things like Auspex again. I guess it's a little bit like things like the jump. It's like the jump isn't affected by the reinforcement rule because it's on the table from the start of the game, and the blips, I guess, are technically on the table from the start of the game.
Where does it say about the reinforcement?
So it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th paragraph, which is after the revealing ambush markers. So it states that, note, even though such units have arrived as reinforcements, this phase they do not count as having moved. So they have stated it in there that it is a reinforcement. Yep.
Okay. I agree with that then. It is. They are coming from reinforcements, so they can be beholden to any sort of auspexing or forewarned or anything like that.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of running a Genestealer Cult army and you see an Elder player across the way with a load of scatterbikes or some other ridiculous long-range nonsense that's going to cause you a horrible time, think about it.
Just deploy your stuff.
Yeah, just deploy your stuff. Go, way, no thanks, pal. That's all right.
I don't want any of this. Yeah. Which brings me on to like the next point in regards to like the whole revealing and unveiling of your Genestealer Cult units is the ability to banish, well, not banish, but return them to the shadows as they were and bring them back on. So, for example, there is an elite unit known as Sanctus, and he has an ability which is Cult Assassin. This model can never have a Warlord trait. In addition, the A Perfect Ambush stratagem has a command point cost of 0 if it is being used to affect this model. So the A Perfect Ambush stratagem costs 3 CP, and it basically means that a model can shoot move D6 or charge, and still carry on like shooting everything else as it would in its normal shooting phase. So this guy technically can go anywhere on the board. He has a heavy 1, 36-inch range, strength 4, AP 1, D3 damage. It doesn't sound like a lot, but he can target any enemy characters, so he can snipe characters. And if you make a wound roll of a 6, and it inflicts 1 mortal wound to its normal damage, if it's a psyker and it loses wounds, then it can suffer perils of the warp. So you take that and then you combine it with a relic, which gives him, I think it's called Gift of the Cult or something like that, but it's a +2 to wound. So suddenly you have the ability to take out some key individuals and probably get some early victory points as well if you're playing in a tournament for sniping out characters and whatnot. I mean, and then, last but not least.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, the last thing was, and then for 1 CP, you can send him back to Lurk in the Shadows, I believe it's called, and then do it all over again.
I think the thing is with him, and again, his sniper rifle, it's a shorter range, obviously, than most sniper rifles. If he goes back to Lurking in the Shadows, is he revealed as a blip, or does he arrive within 9?
So, with the perfect ambush ability, he's not arriving as a blip. He could be set up anywhere on the battlefield.
So in that instance, he does still count as having moved, though. That's one of the things I was trying to get my head around, because it's a heavy 1 gun. So either he's hitting on 2s if he's stationary, but if he does this redeployment, does his BS reduce by 1?
Yeah, so he'll be hitting on 3s.
I mean, it's still not bad. It's just that thing as well. I mean, -1 on a sniper rifle is relatively rare, so that's good. D3 damage is, again, relatively rare for a sniper rifle, which is good as well. And then, lastly, the perils thing is a really, really nice additive, because the idea that potentially you could roll a hit, roll a 6 to wound, resolve your mortal wounds, and then potentially do a wound which then in turn does D3 damage, plus the fact they then have to take D3 damage from perils. He could be good.
He'd be good at dealing with like guard psychers, so like the popular thing of running a Primaris psyker with a bunch of bullgrins, stuff like that. He can just pop up, kill the psyker, because they've only got 3-4 wounds, and we'll take the brunt out of that unit. How many wounds does a guard HQ have?
I want to say 5.
It's 3 normally.
3 normally?
Yeah.
He could potentially just pop up and just knock out a bunch of guard characters.
Well, 1.
1. Yeah. Well, pop up, kill a guard.
They've normally got a 5-up invuln as well.
Yeah, but if it's a psyker, then the mortal wounds, that would be quite nice. The stratagem's called Return to the Shadows. Just want to make that clear.
Didn't you say, though, when they first deployed, though, they don't count as having moved? So does that also count when you return to the Shadows and come back?
They only don't count as having moved when they're revealed as a blip or revealed from a blip. If they arrive using normal reserve rules and within 9 anywhere on the board, they do count as moving. It's only when they're revealed as a blip, which is why I asked about if he goes back to being a blip or whether you just put him on the board as if he's come in from reserves.
So the whole stratagem is that use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select 1 infantry or biker unit from your army that has the Cult Ambush ability and is no more than 3 inches away from enemy models. You cannot select a unit that arrived as reinforcements this turn. Remove that unit from the battlefield. At the end of your next movement phase, this unit is set up on the battlefield again, anywhere that is more than 9 inches away from your enemy models. From any enemy models. Before the battle ends, this unit is destroyed, blah, 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 blah. If the battle ends, this unit is destroyed.
So, yeah, he is able to... It's a standard come in from reserve thing.
Yeah.
And what was the relic called again, you say? Or what did you believe it was called?
It is called... Let me just get back to it. Some lovely interlude music here.
Sorry, I'll edit it out.
That's cool. I won't keep on pretending to chat then.
Well, it's fine, don't need to. We'll edit it out.
It's handy. Relics, come on, relics. Oh, where are they?
Page 116.
Thank you.
What's this guy's model then? Is he the assassin model?
Yeah. It is cool.
Sorry, Tim. Say that now. It was.
It is called The Gift from Beyond. Model with the Jackal sniper rifle or silent sniper rifle, which is what Sanctus has. Adds 2 to the wound rolls for attacks made with this model.
So he's mortal wounding on 4s. Sorry, then.
Technically, yes. If you give him that relic.
That's pretty tidy. So his mortal wound potential goes up, well, exponentially. I mean, basically it's 50-50 odds that you're going to get a mortal wound.
Yeah.
Which makes him absurdly powerful against Psychers, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, if it's a Psyker and he loses a wound, D3, perils yourself.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Very good.
What happens if you do that to a what's it called? Brotherhood of the Psyker? Brotherhood of the what's it?
No idea.
They have the Psyker keyword, well, it depends. They might have Brotherhood, or if they have Brotherhood of the Psyker, and not just... It specifically states the Psyker keyword. So if it's Brotherhood of the Psyker, then it's not affected. But it depends. I don't know the exact wording on Grey Knights or Thousand Suns and all the other bits.
What about a Warlock Conclave?
Warlock Conclave has Psyker, yeah.
Yeah, so... How many wounds does a Warlock have? 1?
2.
2. So it could potentially knock 1.5 off then.
If they're in a conclave, which they never are.
Oh.
Well, I say they never are. They aren't all that often.
Yeah.
I just think it's a nice little answer to take out those pesky psychers that are buffing all the other units, or where you're getting, or is it with the Loyal 32 where you get commands given from a HQ choice? Yeah, and just taking them out just to get rid of that extra buff.
He's a cool model as well.
Yeah, I quite like him.
And he's only 55 points.
He's a bargain. So the other interesting thing is that you can't have duplicates of the HQ choices. I'm not sure about... He's an elite choice, so I'm not sure where the ruling is on that. But so you can only have like 1 Patriarch and 1 Magus.
Okay.
I quite like that, because in the fluff, there's only 1 Patriarch and there's only 1 Magus board, isn't there? In the group.
Yeah, the list I put together is pretty much just like a 4th gen Genestealer Cult list.
Yeah.
Which just has like a Magus and then what's the other dude? Is he called Nexus? What's the dude with the Warhammer World sort of map?
I think it's the Nexus.
I think it's the Nexus. Cool, because like my other cool model, or the other cool thing I like about this is that you can generate CP with this army as well, which is quite nice. And you get bonuses if you take other units with him. So if I just quickly get to this guy, yeah, he's the Nexus.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it might be worth wrapping it up into whatever the third thing... Is this going to be the third thing, or are we going to...
Yes, yeah, this is going to be my third thing.
Okay, cool. And so we're not going to talk about the Brood Brother rules, or...
Well, I thought maybe one of you guys wanted to do that.
Well, it's more just a case of... Because this would be, like, in its entirety, just you talking... We're not all going to talk about separate things. So if there's... What's the next thing? The CP generation?
Yeah. Basically, if your army's battle forged and you have a Nexus and a Primus,
Okay.
And you can add 1 to the result to get a CP back.
All right.
And if you have a Clamavus or a Nexus, then you can add 1 to the result if it's your CP spent.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, crack on with that, mate. Unless, what do we reckon, lads? Do we want to do that and Battle Brother, the guard stuff, or just that and call it a day on this one?
We can do just that. We can briefly, like, I'll just ask what units Brood Brothers can take.
All right.
Sense. Yeah.
Well, Brood Brothers could take anything from the Imperial Guard Codex.
No, it's a reduced list, isn't it?
No, you can take anything.
You can literally take anything from the Guard Codex.
As long as it has the keyword Astra Militarum. And it's not a HQ choice. Yeah.
And it's not a HQ choice.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, it's not a named character.
Sorry, named character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. How rude. All right, cool.
That's what you get for noobiness.
That's it, mate. That's it. So we're not going to talk in great detail about Brood Brothers, but we will just talk about this CP generation. So when you're ready, Tim.
Alrighty. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is that this army has the ability to generate CP, which is getting more and more viable in match play now, as it seems. Every army can do it, and it's about time some Nid-loving faction got it as well. So if you take the Nexus dude, you can roll a d6 either whenever a player spends a command point to use a stratagem, as we all know. But if you take a Nexus and a Primus and they're still on your battlefield, you get to add 1 to the result if your opponent spent the point. And then if you take a Clamavus, so that's the speech talking dude with a big microphone, and a Nexus, you can add 1 to the result if you spend the command point. So in either case, if the result is a 6, you immediately get a 1 command point. Obviously, you can only do this once per phase, but once per battle phase. But having that extra 1 to the roll will pay off, I reckon.
And a fairly cheap army to put on the table as well, aren't they? So you could fill a battalion or brigade with relative ease.
Yeah, I would probably say it's worth doing 2 battalions.
Yeah.
Like the appearance, because with a brigade it's 3 HQ, 6 troop, 3 elite, 3 fast, and 3 heavy support. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's super hard to pull off.
It's quite a lot, and you're kind of limiting yourself in. Well,
I don't know, if you've got an elite's choice, a bunch of elite's choices that only cost 60 points to put on the table.
Yeah, but you can field it. It's just that with your troops choice, they're each going to be 10-man squads. And 6 10-man squads, in my mind, is not that great.
It's so much easier to field 2 lots of battalions rather than try and squeeze an army list into a brigade. Because if you're trying to do that, that's pretty much all you can take. Whereas with 2 battalions, it's like you still got room for a big thing.
Yeah, I worked it out as I'd probably take 2 10-man squads of troops, stick them in Goliaths, and then just have 1 big blob of 20 surrounding my Magus with a cult icon. So they're getting a 6-up reroll, feel no pain essentially, and then getting +1 to leadership. And they're just, if you take that with the rusted claw, they get a 6-up invuln as well. It's all these things just add up, and they can just castle up while the rest of your ridge runners and everything else and jackals fly around the board doing what they do.
How are they dealing with things like knights?
You've got some heavy hitting weapon stuff, but there's a stratagem where it says if your Goliath or Rock Grinder has a cache of demolitions for 1 CP, you don't have to roll to see if it pops. It just pops.
Yeah.
So technically, you could just run your trucks into knights and stuff and just blow them up.
That's pretty solid. I like that.
Yeah. There's two, right, so there's two creeds I'm interested in. There's the Rusted Claw, which is a 6-up invuln, and infantry don't suffer any minuses for hit rolls if they move to heavy weapons.
Yeah.
And then there's the oh no, that's the Bladed Cod. Sorry, the Rusted Claw is any biker unit. Basically, if it has a rend if it's getting shot with a rend characteristic of 0 or -1, you can add 1 to the save roll, but they receive no minuses to hit their heavy weapons as well. So, yeah. So I was thinking of taking like the Jackal Lady with a bunch of Jackals and a Wolf Guard, some Ridge Runners, and you can add 6 inches to their movement as well, I think. And she's -1 to hit with ranged weapons, and they have like flare guns, so they have a 6-up sort of ramshackle, as it were. There's some pretty tasty stuff in this book. I guess I'd close out with, like, it seems like you can do anything you want. You can make a well-rounded army, or you can make an elite heavy one, or you could just run Genestealers up the board and give them a +1 to their invuln, which would be pretty tasty. So you've gone from a 5-up invuln Genestealer to a 4-up invuln Genestealer, which is frightening. You know, the world's your oysters, or you could just have like loads of bodies. It's great. It's going to be a fun army. How they do in competitive would be quite interesting. I reckon there'll be some smart people make some really interesting lists with them. So yeah,
that is pretty cool. I think they're going to be quite popular, but I think we're going to have to wait until more events have come out and we've seen how they perform in the hands of other people now, really, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll be interesting to see if any of like the famous players start rolling them.
I think they're all too busy being like Dan, an elder.
I was curious what you meant by that, but yeah, okay. I'm far from anything resembling a famous player.
Oh. You are now.
Most of the famous
You
players,
are to us, Dan.
Most of the famous players are famous for cheating, aren't they? Let's be honest with ourselves. Because that's all the LVO was, as I saw last week. It was just lots and lots of people going, "Who's a cheat?" And it's like, oh, Lord.
The chat flared up.
That's the problem about events nowadays. People don't care about like the armies and like how fun and how exciting it is. They're like, we want drama, cheats only, please.
Rabble.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that sucks a bit because when you're running an event, you don't want that negativity floating around. And then all of a sudden, the guy who gets into the final of the Las Vegas Open is the guy who apparently cheated at the London event. And it's just like, that's in the past. Move on. Like he's won all these tournaments and he's managed to get all the way to here and he's got to the finals. Let's just appreciate that and not beat him up in the toilet.
Wow, I don't know what kind of hobby we've got into if people are getting beaten up into the toilet,
That's
toilets.
It's Vegas.
I mean, I appreciate this is the Joe show, but maybe Joe would take the direction of his glamorous assistant Dan, or whatever you said I was at the start, and take this as a perfectly valid opportunity to move on to the next topic.
Yep. Me! Huzzah! Yeah, we could talk about some dice. That sounds fun, doesn't it? It's like when you're at school and we're going to a box making factory. But it'll be fun. Just you wait. And now, it's my part of the show where I talk about what I want to talk about. Not that there's other things that I talk about in other shows, but today I get to choose. And for some reason, I put it out there that I want to talk about dice. And you go, Joe, why are you so boring? And it's not boring. Because those little cubes are at the centre of our game. And we base all the things that happen in the game on the results of these tiny little dots. And we put them to a thematic scene, whether a Space Marine hits a guardsman in the face or not. So, anyway, what I really wanted to talk about is a conversation that pops up after every tournament I go to about mainly custom dice. And when you're playing a game and your opponent's going to go, I'm going to seize now, and he dips into his bag of 1,000,000 different types of dice and pulls out the dice that's on its own, and it's got like a picture of a pirate or a cat dressed as a potato, something ridiculous on the 6, and he just goes funk, and it rolls a 6. And I want to kind of discuss the whole idea of like, maybe we should have these in competitive play as well. What do you guys think?
I mean, it depends what you're actually trying to get across here. Are you suggesting that everyone that you've ever played, or a proportion thereof, are cheating?
No, what I'm saying is that, like, when people, I think when you're playing with your custom dice at home, it's all fun and exciting.
Right.
But when you're at an event, and this has happened to all of us, I was speaking to you about it the other day, that like when you're playing against someone and they're just like rolling suspiciously high or suspiciously low, and it happens to me all the time, and it's always with custom dice from like the internet, and it does that weird psychological thing when someone seizes on you with some spazzy dice, and you're like, something's up here, and it might not be up, but you instantly go down that route of
Joe,
these are dodgy dice.
Don't you have a set of custom dice that are renowned for rolling suspiciously
Well, that's why
high?
we call them cheaty dice. That's why we got them. I got them from an event that I went to, and they've got skulls on them, and they roll high. And I don't play with those when I go to tournaments, because it looks weirdly suspicious. These dice are rolling really high all the time. So when we talked about the LVO, when you get to the top 8, they have 20 casino dice on the table, and when you're playing your game, you're only allowed to use those dice because it's like a sterile environment, and you can't be accused of cheating. And I think this is the discussion part of it, that when you go to a tournament, that you have the same dice, you use the same stuff. So, like from Games Workshop, you can buy that little tub of 20 red, white, black, blue, green dice, and I kind of think that everyone should use the same one to kind of stop that kind of like weird negative psychology when it comes to rolling these things. What do you think?
I mean, I don't disagree with you in the fact that I think something like that could be useful to benefit the initial concern or the initial, negative nature of the starting of a game. Because when everyone kicks off in any tournament game or, competitive game or whatever the setting may be, there's that, initial feeling out process. There's the part of the game where you don't know this person. You may know their reputation if they're a particularly high caliber player, or that you've seen them at events but you've not had to play them yet, and they've performed well at those events. So yeah, I mean, I get it, like from a perspective that there's that sort of initial feeling out process, and when everything seems to go their way, you obviously instinctively feel like you've been cheated. So I do understand what you're saying, and I do think if you were to standardize it and give everyone the same dice, that may help with the initial kind of potential frustration. But I think, again, a lot of that could be projected on the person based on various parts of their attitude. So I think it's a bigger question about how you kind of begin to kind of trust and understand that the people you're playing are unlikely to do something like that to gain the advantage. Though, again, I feel like there's always going to be a degree of doubt in your mind, and you could always believe that people may be seeking those advantages. So it's difficult. It's difficult to know for sure. I think with the Warhammer World events, it may not be the end of the world if they were to include in the price of admission an extra couple quid on the basis that when you arrive at every table, there is 2 pots of 20 dice, and that's your allocation for the event, and you can only use them. I mean, sure. For the independent tournaments, I think, again, maybe that's the same deal. But then, as much as people may use dice perceivably for cheating, it may just be that they like the feel of them, they like the weight of them, they just like rolling them. There's a lot of potential connections to that. So again, I don't know. I don't think it's a clear-cut thing, but I would happily agree to that stipulation if I felt like, and I believe it would lead towards a more fair and less, what's the word for it? A less fractured kind of community scene. If I knew that doing something as simple as that would result in everyone coming away from the event or the tournament not being unnecessarily negative about the experience based on the perception of cheating, then fine. But then even people use like weird rolling techniques. I always sort of see when people start kind of gently putting their hand out and then sort of, you know, leaving like a ramp with their palm, that the dice sort of just flop out of their hand, and you go, seems like a very weird way to roll. But then that could be done on the premise that they want to keep the dice on the table, and that's a more efficient way of doing it. Because I know the way I roll, dice are flying everywhere. I'm an absolute lunatic when it comes to that sort of stuff.
It's a nightmare sometimes.
Yes.
They're everywhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my side of things, sure, do that. Yeah. But I don't think... I think the only way of improving the situation is to do what you're suggesting, which is to standardise it and supply dice.
Or have, like, a tournament. I'd quite like to have, like, an official tournament set of dice. So, like, when we did a doubles event and we played against Kerry, remember Kerry from Warhammer TV, the guy on her team had mini casino dice, like perfectly square-edged, cherry red dice, because not standard casino dice are huge, clunky, stabby things, and he had these quite nice little dice. They're about the same size as the GW ones, but they just seem to roll 100 times better.
You can get blackgammon dice, which I still think they're slightly curved, but they're less so. They're not square to the point like casino ones are, but they are precision dice and are meant to roll much better. It's weird because I think there's a few issues. There's the confusion of custom dice. So if there's a symbol on both sides of, say, the 1 to 6, which one's which is sometimes not clear, and there's the illusion that if something has an embossed symbol on the 6, it is slightly lighter than on the 6 side than it is on the 1, so therefore the 1's slightly heavier and you're more likely to naturally roll a 6, although the chances are it doesn't really affect the game all that much. I mean, if you were to roll them 1,000 times, even if they are weighted, I don't think they're weighted to what everyone thinks it is. And then there's also the confusion because I remember playing against people that used the GW Elder dice, and they are confusing as hell to tell what the symbols were. And I remember when we were doing a doubles event, it took me one game. It took me like say 3 or 4 turns to work out what symbols meant. And by that point, I realised the friend of the guy that we were playing with, because it was a doubles event, even he was picking up the wrong dice because he couldn't tell what they were. And I had to be like, oh no, that is a 3 and that's a miss, because eventually I worked it out. And it's like those sorts of dice are just sort of too confusing for that kind of game, because you need to be as transparent as possible with your opponent, what you're rolling. So there's no illusion or deception as to what you're doing.
Those Elder dice are like the worst thing ever when gaming. Like, I can never read them.
Yeah,
I'm curious which Elder dice you're referring to, because all the Elder dice I'm aware of just have the number on them.
The number, but with a whole bunch of crazy Elder symbols next to them.
I mean, they're not
the glyphs as well.
Yeah, they're not super user friendly. The Dire Avenger ones are relatively okay. The swooping
I think
hawks,
the swooping hawks are the best ones, I reckon.
No, they're the worst.
Because the numbers on them are huge.
Oh, maybe it's the Banshee ones that are terrible, isn't it?
And the
Striking Scorpion ones, the green and yellow ones.
Yeah, green and yellow ones are quite awkward. I mean, they're not great. You should just use normal dotted dice, i.e. a 6 is 6 dots, not a face or whatever. But people like them, don't they? Because, again, a lot of the time when you go to these competitive events, most people are there promoting a brand. You know, mini wargaming, tabletop tactics, Hellstorm wargaming. All these guys have their own dice. I played on a live stream against the guy from Hellstorm wargaming, old Mikey, and he sees the initiative on me using his Hellstorm wargaming dice. And he told me beforehand, he went, oh, this dice always seizes. It always seizes for me, which only further kind of made me go, all right, okay, you've kind of laboured the point, but all right, great. Let's see if it doesn't do it this time. And it did. And it was like, I don't know if that made it sound more bad or less bad. Not to suggest that the game was bad. It was a fantastic experience, and I had a great time playing against the guy. And it was probably the game of the event, not just because of the fact we played on a live stream, but actually playing against Mikey was super fun. But, you know, going back to the original point, it does create a weird vibe where the first thing he does is seize the initiative off you. Especially when he had a bit of a ceremony around it where he's like, oh, it's definitely going to happen, I'm telling you. And then I think he even said, like, 6 when he rolled it or something. And I was like, oh, okay. Seems a little bit... But again...
Then it becomes a situation of, like, how many times have you seized at this 5-game event kind of thing?
Indeed. But, to be fair to Mikey, you know, sometimes you just get lucky. And playing him throughout the entirety of that game, he was completely down the middle. I do not believe for a moment that he did anything, you know, wrong in that instance. I just think he got lucky. But the problem is, I hadn't ever met the guy before that day, and his army was strong, and he got the role he needed at the start, and it completely tilted that game, because had I gone first against him, because my army was deployed on the simple basis that I should be going first against him, because back then we were using the first to deploy goes first rule from early 8th edition, so I was of the opinion I was going first. And then I wasn't. And then I lost. And then it's like, okay, I played 5 games that weekend. That was the one I lost. And you know, it happens. So, yeah, it was interesting. I think it's what it is.
It's that perception of, because everyone talks about the dice gods and how fickle they can be. And it's like sometimes you roll really well and sometimes you roll really badly. And I'm pretty sure... in plenty of my games where my dice are just doing amazingly good, it's like I'm rolling 5s and 6s for the whole game, and my opponent must just be like, well, these are just like loaded dice. But he didn't see me in my previous game with a different opponent where I was just rolling ones constantly. And it's like, you can have games where you do roll really well, and it's nothing to do with how loaded or fixed your dice are. It's just a random, it's just random. And in the course of it being random, you will have games where you just roll consistently well, and then you'll have other games where you just roll consistently bad. And it's that kind of perception of, there's got to be something behind it, when that's often just not the case.
You say that, but then do you remember your massive cube of Mechanicum Apocalypse dice?
Yes, yeah, which I'm convinced do roll really badly, and I'm pretty sure I did like a test and rolled them all 100 times, and they did seem to roll pretty bad. But then yours, which are exactly the same, roll really well.
Yeah, it's madness. Although, have you seen the new Squig dice?
Well, they look pretty crazy.
Yeah, I love the new Squig dice. They're great, but I feel if anyone ever used them against me, I would probably just go mad and throttle them to death, because they're made of rubber.
Well, they're the same, or they're similar to, was it the Nurgle dice that came out, which had the sort of plastic with the foam inside, so they were quite light and bouncy.
And if anyone uses those dice, they're clearly insane. Because
I feel like that's probably a bit of an extreme statement, but
yeah. They don't roll, because they just go thunk, 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 thunk across the table, but I can't create the weird hollow noise that they make. And then they're literally unreadable, because they're like, is that like 3 dots? Or is it 4? We can't tell. Because the 3 and the 4 are almost identical, apart from the 4 has a tiny, tiny little pustule that's like barely visible at a glance, kind of thing. So if you have to roll like 20 dice, like all 20 at once, you have to spend 2 minutes going through, like, is this a hit? Is it a miss? This is madness. Madness, I say.
So just to steer the conversation back to the original point then, like, how much do casino dice cost? Or is this just something you expect the organizer to provide?
I think if it's a GW event, I think they could supply one of those little tubs, those 20 dice things, because their cost price is literally about £2. But I understand for like smaller events, that's probably not doable.
Well, yeah, having a cursory glance on Amazon, a set of 5 casino dice, which are the quite large ones, are 11 quid, 12 quid. It's like, that's not feasible to run at an event. And even if you used like smaller sets of precision dice, the only way it would work is if it was run by a store, and the store made sure that they got to keep them. Because then they can reuse them again and again. But I can imagine dice will go missing at every event when that happens.
Or it's just used on the top table, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like LVO top table and things like that.
Like if GW released, so like I've talked about this before. If they've released the Commanders box set now, which is a specific set of tournament rules. And it comes in the box, and you've got your counters and stuff, and how to run an event. So, if they release that for 40k, they could release the 40k tournament edition rules pack that all events use, and you play all your proper match play games with. But then they come with a specific set of dice in it, and everyone just uses those set of dice at an event.
The other option is that everyone uses the dice app from Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Because then everyone buys it themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it is. I imagine it's like 4 quid.
The problem with that, though, is it doesn't work on Android.
Yeah, I would assume so. They wouldn't limit themselves to...
Currently, it's only Apple products.
Oh, it might be, actually, yeah.
That's a bit silly. Why would you limit yourself to one market? But
yeah. But that's just my thoughts on on dice. And I'd like to see a standardization for events, just to stop unnecessary bad feel bads, as it were.
Well, yeah, I think in addition to dice, there's just general, like I said, there's a lot of dice etiquette in terms of how you should be rolling, or you shouldn't be rummaging into a bag and pulling out one dice when you've got to do like your C's, and then a different dice when you do your leadership roll, for example. But like I've got a pot of 20 dice, or actually it's like 30 or whatever, and I use that. But as soon as I sort of feel like I'm rolling ones and I'm going to re-roll it, I'll never use that sort of same dice again. I'd always grab a new one to roll. And that's just like, even though, like I said, it's random, it does feel like if the dice isn't rolling well, you want to use a different one.
But myself and Tim used the sexy blue dice that come from the Age of Sigmar starter set.
Oh, the Soul Wars dice. They are sexy.
Yeah. So everyone should use those, because they look great. And I think if everyone's using the same dice as well, that they become a standard readable thing as well. You don't want that kind of like confusion of like kind of thing happening.
Well, I guess potentially it would speed the game up as well, because if effectively they're shared dice between the two of you, not you have a set and I have a set. Yeah. So if you roll like 15 dice to wound me, rather than me then counting out 15 dice, I'll just use yours, because that then speeds the game up. But people are quite precious about that sort of thing when it comes to their dice. But if you've got the house dice and you're just sharing a pot between you, for example, maybe it's less of an issue.
Well, maybe that's something that could be thought about or play tested. Maybe we should try it out, just using one set, see how fast it speeds up an event.
Mm.
Or maybe if you go to an event, go like, just to speed things up, just use my dice.
Joe, you're going to run an event?
No. We'll go into another event in the future, which will actually lead us on to our next section, about the Brawlentines Massacre event that we went to. So we might as well talk about that, because we've dragged it on, talking about dice, and I'm sure people have fallen asleep in their cars and on the bus and the train. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. It's something close to my heart and my hands. Yes.
Fair enough.
Moving on. Transitional noises. All together now. 1, 2, 3. So, the next section that we're going to talk about right now is the Brawlentines Massacre event run by Entoyment store in Poole, run by our friend Adam from 40k Brawl. And it was a 1750 point, 1 day event, 3 games, all very good fun. And to keep this exciting and fast paced, unlike my dice talk, which I'm now regretting, the 4 of us get 5 minutes to talk about our army in brief and the games that we had. And then afterwards, we'll have a little ramble, but I'll probably get advised against it because I'm terrible at this. So, starting with Phil, I'm going to press...
Oh, the pressure is on.
Yeah. So, tell us about your army in brief and your 3 games. And, right, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so I took a very infantry-heavy list with 4 lots of general troop choices, 2 lots of grenadiers, and an engineer squad, a heavy weapons squad, field officers, a commander, a commissar on horse, and 2 regular tank commanders, one with plasma, one with the relic battle cannon, and then 2 of the, I want to say, Exterminator Lieben Russes with the autocannons, and that was pretty much my list. Bit experimental in a few cases in terms of taking the Emperor's Fist attachment. My first game was up against a lovely guy who had Dark Elder, I believe, and basically he completely smashed me. I played the objectives really well, but he was totally winning. I completely screwed up on some rules about how flyers work, so I do apologise on the off chance he's listening. That was my bad. Second game was against a guy who run Knights and Blood Angels. It was a pretty interesting game. It was pretty close. It was a draw right up until the end when we had to count up the objectives, because it is ETC format where it's Eternal War for a primary mission and then a Maelstrom for a second. You basically play both missions at once, which is a bit confusing. But that was close, but then I came out with a win because of the objectives you count up at the very end. And then my last game was against a Deathwatch player who had Imperial Guard and a Castellan Knight. Oh, my last game was also against a guy with Knights who had Castellan as well. So Castellans in both games were just blasting things left, right and centre. But I managed to win this game as well. Because it was very close. There's some really cool moments, but obviously there's not enough time to talk about any of that. But I came away with 2 wins and 1 loss in the end. And I placed, I think, 16th? Something like that. How am I doing for time?
You've got 3 minutes left. You've blitzed.
Oh, I've blitzed through too quickly. Oh, well, then I can go into a bit more detail. So, in my second game, my tank commander with the Relic Battle Cannon managed to one-shot a Helverin, which are always the bane of my lives whenever I play against Joe. So that was a sort of a momentary highlight. There was another bit where his Death Company Marines came down and got stuck in against a bunch of my Marines and against my infantry, and I sort of managed to survive. They fell back from combat. The officer ordered them to get back into the fight. I then used the Grenadier stratagem on them and killed a bunch of his Marines. And then there was another time when I managed to leapfrog a bunch of men off the board because they managed to disembark from a Storm Chimera. So they disembarked 3 inches, then got to do a move and advance. So that's 6 inches plus D6. And then I had an officer on horseback ride up to be in line with them as well. And then in the shooting phase, I did move, so they could move and advance again. My opponent was like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, well, that's what they can do. And I basically sort of managed to go over, like, how many would have been? It would have been like 18 to 20 inches in total, if not a bit more, to kind of grab an objective that I needed to that turn to score me a Maelstrom card. And then in my final game, there was a great moment where my Plasma Russ got charged by a Smash Captain who didn't have the Overwatch mask or jetpack, whichever one it is, and by a squad of Deathwatch Marines. They both failed their charge, and I used Defensive Gunners and the Warlord trait from the Emperor's Fist attachment, which has been a reroll, failed shots from Overwatch, and I basically did a couple of wounds on the Smash Captain, and I killed, I think it was 3 or 4 Marines, so that was pretty productive, and he wasn't too happy about that. So those were sort of my highlights I can remember that were pretty good from those games, and they were all lovely chaps. So it was, all 3 pretty good games. The last game I think was probably my best because he had Deathwatch, which was nice to see.
Solid. You got 42 seconds left.
Any questions? I'll take them now in this 40 seconds.
What would you say was the best performing unit in your army this time around?
Oh, do you know what? That's a bit hard to say because the Hellhounds did well when they weren't getting shot at. I'd probably just the infantry, the ability to have enough of them on the board to survive getting shot at, but then comboing them with the orders, I found really powerful. Because normally I don't really bother because orders aren't that great or stratagems aren't that great either. But doing things like having your Grenadier squad in cover and then using take cover on them so they have a 2-up save because they've got a 4-up save, +1 for being in cover, and then +1 for the take cover stratagem. That can make your units, your ones with carapace armor at least, quite survivable. And then I also had I basically splurged loads of money on relics, basically. So I spent 3 CP to get for 3 relics. So one of them was the dagger, So I always outflanked a squad of grenadiers, which was always handy because it pretty much guaranteed me line breaker every turn, every game, which was, one victory point. And then I normally shot something off the board with them as well. And if I had time, I would grab an objective with them as well. So in a couple of games, that squad alone, just even though they didn't really do a huge amount, it probably helped win the 2 games that I did win.
So 2 wins, 1 loss, man. That's a good performance for you.
I know. So I surprised myself actually, because I thought I was likely to lose the second one against the Knight player, but I sort of managed to, as you say, play the mission, and I did that pretty well on every game, and basically avoided even shooting at the Castellan the majority of the time, and just took out his Helverins, and just tried to take out all his troops as much as possible. So by the end, he had a squad of, half a squad of Death Company left, a Helverin and the Castellan, and I think that was it that he had left. And I still had a bunch of units sort of scattered around the board. And there wasn't a lot he could do in terms of me. He couldn't stop me from getting on objectives.
Good work.
Nice.
Yeah, it was difficult to play with that many units, because it was about 70 to 80 odd infantrymen. But other than that, I mean, it was good fun.
Sweet. Good. Now, next person for speed and efficiency, the streamlined ginger beast, Tim.
Hello. When's my time start?
Right. You've got 3, 2, 1, speak.
Right, okay, so my first game was... see how slow I can take this. Was against Phil's last dude that he played, and the army I was taking with me was my Tyranids. It was pretty much the same list that I took to the GT, except for minus the Spore Mine, the big giant Spore Mine. And I also threw in a Mana Scepter there because I just had nothing else painted up and couldn't be bothered to paint anything else up either. So my first game, I hung in there. I managed to seize the initiative. My Genestealers got the first turn charge, which was quite nice, and I deleted a set of bikes and a set of guardsmen with that. So that was quite nice. But then going against the Castellan and the Death Watch, they just deleted everything else, so it wasn't really a competition for him, but it was a fun game nevertheless. But a loss is a loss, so that meant I went down to the bottom tables, which was glorious because I was like, right, bottom tables, fun people to play against, no pressure now, I'm well in for the Lemon Award. And I came up a game against a guy called Ollie, who was just running Knights with a bit of Custodes. So he had a Knight Gallant, I think it was the Gallant, can't remember. But he had 2 Helverins, 1 Armiger, 2 Shield Captains, and the sort of Terminator Custodes, who were put in reserve and go to Deep Strike in. I got the first turn on this one, and I decided to charge my Genestealers into his Knight just because why not, and I didn't really think he would take the bait, but they managed to get it off, and I took like 6. There was only 8 within range in the end of them, and I took 6 wounds of it. But what that meant was that I could use my Exocrine and my Hive Guard and my Tyrannofix to just single fire down the Helverins and the Armigers, and for that particular mission it was the big game hunter one. So I chose, because it was ETC rules, you get to choose which type of unit slot you can score points against. So I chose super heavies, and so yeah, I just started whittling them away, and for some reason he kept on ignoring my Exocrine but took out the Tyrannofix and my warriors and my Morlock and stuff when it popped out. But because he couldn't see my Hive Guard, and my X-Cream was still alive, I was able to use the stratagems of making the Hive Guard shoot twice to help get rid of another Helverin, and then adding 1 to the damage characteristics of my X-Cream, so it meant it was doing 3 damage a wound instead of 2, which meant I could delete off the Armiger. Once that went, it was literally just a case of taking off the Custodies, so that was a win for me. And then my final game was up against a guy called Chris who ran Old One Eye and I want to say 6 stack effects, 3 with heavy venom cannons and the rest with Devourers. And that was just a straight up shooty fest, really, between my shooty army and his shooty army. He had 2 Neuronthropes for his Warlords for the CPs. Obviously to make it Battle Forged, and that was pretty much it. I just again focus fired down each of the Carnifexes one by one, and then tried to snipe out his Neuronthrope with my Morlock when the opportunity came up, and that was a win for me. So all in all, a pretty good day. And then to top it off, I got best painted for my army as well, which was it made my day getting that. That's all I really wanted.
You beat Phil for best painted.
I know.
Oh, right, you old dramas. No, well done. That was, and it was judged by a Golden Demon winner, apparently. He seemed like a nice chap when I briefly spoke to him.
Yeah.
Not bitter at all.
Nah, I mean, obviously he's blind or something.
Right, exactly.
Wow. Wow.
Tim, do you feel that these 2 wins have reinvigorated your love for your Tyranids? Are you going to try and keep running them competitively?
No, not really. Like, I will do a competitive list with them again. It's just the logistical thought of painting like gaunt after gaunt after gaunt to match the standard of my army is just a horrifying thought at the moment. I want to do something, a different army, hence Genestealer Cults. Like, I've got the Elder army on the side, and that's just to give me a different army to play with, while I can have a slow burner project, really. I'll never stop doing my Nids. I like my Nids. They're a fun army to play. I just, haven't got the oomph to do them at the moment.
Okay, awesome. Right, Dan, going to pass this on to you next. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure, man. Went far away.
Right. This is mainly because I'm desperate to go to the toilet. Right then. 3, 2, 1, go!
It was Saturday, the 9th of February, 2019, and around 6 a.m. in the morning, I was risen from my slumber to travel to Poole from where I live, which I won't say for the sake of anonymity. But nonetheless, myself and Phil arose from within the confines of my house. We weren't sharing a bed. Let that be known. Not that it wouldn't matter if we did, right, Phil?
No, that wouldn't be weird at all.
That would not be weird at all. We're at that point. It's in full-blown bromance. We travelled to Poole, a journey of around an hour and a half, transported by the lovely Tim, in great care, I would say. Beautiful drive by Tim, all in, wouldn't you say, sir?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah,
there you go.
It was a lovely drive.
The army I had brought for this event was an army that I had been working on over the past month and a bit since the release of Chapter Approved 2018. And one of the things I discovered back in 2018 Chapter Approved was that the new rules essentially had made it so as the old sudden death scenario of only having flyers on the board was no longer in effect. And I, as did as well the second place finalist of the LVO and a few other very, very clever tournament players, came up with the idea of taking an Elder army comprised of a variety of flyers as well as some scatterbikes and a few other elements. So my army in its entirety was 2 Crimson Hunter Exarchs, 2 Hemlocks with Jink and Smite, as is their way. The Crimson Hunter Exarchs had the Star Cannons. I then had 3 of the Dark Elder Razor Wings, and they were armed with the Dark Lances and the twin Splinter Rifles. I then had an Outrider detachment of 3 units of 5 Scatterbikes, which you may remember from the army that I used at Grand Tournament Heat 3. And that was backed up by a Farseer and 2 8-man units of Storm Guardians. So remarkably similar to what Alex, or whatever his name was, used to come second at the LVO the same weekend. So quite by chance, I had come up with an army that also a bunch of other very clever people had also come up with, which is fantastic, because it obviously goes some way towards saying that I'm also pretty good at coming up with army lists, but obviously now I have to live in the shadows of the guy who came up with it and used it at the LVO, because no one's going to believe for a second when I start using it at future events that I also miraculously came up with it myself. Nonetheless, Game 1, I played against a Blood Angel player by the name of Samuel. I can't remember his surname, but it was dear old Sam. I had played him in a previous event, a doubles event, when I was playing with Matt, and he was running a Blood Angels army, which I absolutely smashed. This guy is a young lad starting on his competitive journey. He is not yet as seasoned or beardy as someone as myself, and he suffered at the hands of what is a very, very top-tier army up against an army that include things like tactical squads, Bow Predators, Librarian Dreadnoughts, things that don't really belong in top-table competitive play, and was reflected in the fact that he died super easily, and I came out of the first game with a score of 63 points to his 6, making me the #1 contender at the end of round 1. And what did the fates have in store for me in game 2? Well, it was none other than Rob Taylor and his Imperial Knights. So Rob, really, really good guy, comes from around the Bournemouth area. Absolute delight to play. Now, there was a little bit of shenanigans between me and Adam at the start, which was all good fun between me and Adam, because we've known each other for years and we seemingly have that kind of dynamic. But I did realise that kind of having a bit of a row with Adam at the start, even though I thought it was kind of done in all a fun kind of way, may have been misconstrued by my opponent, who was probably thinking, this seems a bit off. But nonetheless, we struggled through, the game got going, and we had just a fantastic time. It was a 5-turn conclusion. Imperial Knights are incredibly difficult to kill. He had the Knight Gallant, the Knight Crusader. He also had another big knight, which I'm now forgetting which one it was. I can't remember for the life of me now. But nonetheless, he had that. He had an armature. He had a bunch of Skitarii stuff. And it took me a couple turns to get going. But in the end, poor old Rob lost and became the 23rd or maybe 24th win in my 24-win tournament undefeated streak, which was all going great until round 3, where I got to play against a guy called Joe Malum, something along those lines. Joe was running a Drakari army, and as soon as I'd set my eyes upon it, I was like, okay, cool. If he goes first, I'm done for. And going back to Joe's original topic on dice, he miraculously rolled exactly what he wanted to need, or rather exactly what he needed in order to go first. So he rolled that all-important 1, and I failed to then seize the initiative on a 6. So I knew from the outset that I was in for a difficult time. He proceeded within the first turn to cripple my army by removing a lot of my backline pressure in the form of scatterbikes. And then in return, I didn't do significant enough damage to his Venoms and to his various other Drakari options. And in turn 2, I was completely tilted as the entirety of my army was crumbling around me. And at that point, there was very little else to do other than to suck it up and to endure what was to come. But in the end, he defeated me by 60 points to 1. So I got absolutely trounced in the finals to an army that was very well designed to deal with mine. on the basis that it went first, and that's what it did. So you can't win them all. I was enjoying the relative fun of a win streak, but fair play to Joe. He absolutely got it done and went on to win the overall tournament. Whether me or Joe won that game was going to determine the overall winner of the event. Being that it was only a 3-dayer, I essentially, losing that last game, got knocked out of the top 4, finishing in 6th place, bizarrely, because somehow 5 people managed to win 3 out of 3 games. But at the end of the day, I had a really good time. Adam and the team at Entoyment, or however they say it, run a really great event. I fed back to Adam a few little things that I think could be improved for the future. I think we could do with an extra hour bolted on, just to be able to spend some time in the store and actually get a bit more of a break between games, because it is quite a frantic pace from game to game. And I think there's definitely could be a little bit of work done to improve the way that missions and things are explained, because you're using so many rules layered on rules. It wasn't immediately obvious in some instances exactly what was in effect. Didn't bother me necessarily so much because I'd sort of done the research beforehand, but I knew that Richie, who isn't here to talk about his games, had some issues using more objectives than was necessary. A lot of opponents didn't understand how certain mechanics were working in tandem with each other. So I think, there's a little way still to go for the guys at 40k Brawl events, but overall I highly recommend them and really hope to see some of the guys listening to this podcast joining us at the next one in April, which I believe is called, Joe, do you know?
It is called Easter Slam. It's on the 6th of April at Entoyment Wargaming.
There you go. So we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you there, because we'll be there, or at least I will be, Joe will be. Phil, you going to this one in April?
Possibly. It's a bit of a trek, is my only issue, but I did actually really... I did really enjoy it. So if we could do more of these kind of events, that would be really great.
There you go. So I'm aware I spoke for a little longer than I should have done, but Joe was away on the toilet, so I kind of took liberties at the start.
I was hoping he was going to cut you off short.
Well, I think he muted himself, is what I can only assume.
I did, because I'm a genius. And then I tried to stop Dan. I was like, Dan, stop! Stop with your ceaseless talking.
I shouldn't have done that whole bit at the start where I set the scene of the morning of. I should have started saying what temperature it was, the weather, how the drive went, all that sort of stuff, but, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Joe, I know it's your show and you're supposed to introduce each of these things, but no one else is going to introduce you, so I'll take the initiative. You got 5 minutes, Joe. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Have at it.
Right. So, I ran Death Watch. I ran a battalion with a Watch Master and a Librarian with a jump pack. 2 units of 10 Death Watch Marines. We're all with Stormbolters, because that's the new hotness. One unit had 4 Storm Shields in it, and everyone else had Chainswords. The other unit had 3 Storm Shields, and everyone else had Chainswords. And then a lowly unit of 5 with 5 Stormbolters, 2 Storm Shields, and 3 Chainswords. And then I had the Vanguard detachment with a Watch Captain with a jump pack, front hammer, and a Storm Shield. 2 Sicarans with las cannons. A Venerable Dreadnought with las cannon and missile launcher. A unit of 3 aggressors, and then a Xiphon for anti everything, basically, because it's a bit of a beast. And so my first game was against Ryan Atcliffe, who was running a Yunari Eldar. Oh no, it wasn't Yunari. It was just Eldar Craft Worlds for a change, and that blew my mind. And I was like, I got this in the bag because I practice this against Dan all the time. Dan uses Eldar. It's going to be great. I should smash this, and I'll feel great because I built an Eldar army. Fast forward an hour and 15 minutes later, I'd been practically tabled because Ryan, through some kind of magical skills, used tactics and gaming prowess to beat me, and that is terrifying. Terrifying knowledge. He basically beat me by deploying well out of range, and then using his Eldar trickery of speed, zoomed at the table and killed everything. So I lost that game. I lost it. It was 19-8. Game 2, I played against Darren Gauntlet, who was running a cool chaos list, which had the big corn choo-choo train with the axe and the Gatling cannon, and about 100 cultists. And he actually went first, and he threw his angry choo-choo train into my lines, and I was like, Storm Shields, bro. And he did nothing. And then in my turn one, killed the angry train, and it was great. Killed a bunch of cultists, and then he was like, I'm gonna do Tide of Traitors, and then he brought them in. They didn't do much because he put them too far out of range, and then I killed them all. And that was pretty much game. And that game actually ended with the exact same points of my first game, but reversed. And I got 19, he got 8. And then my last game was against a guy called Andy Matthews, I want to say. I apologise if I've got your last name wrong. But yeah. And he was running guard with a shadow sword, 3 Lehman Russes, 2 Basilisks, 2 Wyverns, and then all the guard with all the mortars. I looked at their list, and I was like, bugger. This is going to go horribly, horribly wrong. And by the end of the game, I had my Watchmaster alive and 1 unit of 7, 8 veterans. And he had most of his army. I think he'd lost the Shadow Sword, he'd lost another Lehman Russ, and a Wyvern, and a lot of infantry. But the breed was pretty well standing. But my veterans had locked a Lehman Russ in a circle, so it couldn't escape. So it was basically trapped there, and that was my way of not being tabled. And I actually won that game by 1 point. It was something like 23-24, and it was probably one of the hardest games I've had to play, but probably one of the best because it was so tactical. And that was a really good game. And in the end, I think I came 14th, I want to say, joined 14th with someone else. And that was really good for me because last time I went to their event, I only won 1 game out of the 3. So that's pretty solid.
Showing signs of improvement. That was roughly 5.5 minutes. So yeah.
So close.
Getting towards 6. You kind of had the opportunity to round it out, but you didn't. You kept going.
I was like, Sam had the extra time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not criticising. I'm simply saying...
This is my show.
Exactly. But what I was thinking is if you'd done it pretty much exactly on time, we could have used that as leverage to say, and that is why this is the Joe Show. Look at that. But as it transpires, it didn't come to pass.
No, I was greedy. I was a greedy pig.
So the final tally for that event was Joe won 2, lost 1. Phil won 2, lost 1. Yeah, Phil?
Yep.
And Tim won 2, lost 1.
That's correct.
I won 2, lost 1.
Yeah.
And Richie lost 2 and won 1. So of all of us, Richie's the worst.
And that's why he's not here.
That's why he's not here. But I did also get defeated after a period of long-standing undefeatedness at tournaments, which was a sad time for me. A little lump in my throat at the end of it. I tried every which way to, come to terms with that reality, but as it is, I just have to accept now that, My 2018 glories are behind me. And, you know, I've started 2019 as the loser. I will continue to be.
We were concerned how you take the loss. We were like, oh, he could go one or two ways. And we thought he's just going to be sullen, he's going to have a little weep, or he's just going to flip that table and kill that Dark Eldar player.
I mean, one of the great benefits of having, you know, not lost in a long time is that you kind of get very good at, like, well, you try and get good at winning in the sense that when you're beating people, you're not being unnecessarily unfair about stuff, and you're giving opportunities without being too charitable. You know, you try and sort of manage that flow, but at the same time, there's no glamorous way of winning because your opponent is always frustrated at the fact that they're losing. So yeah, I just had to suck it up. At the end of the day, I've done it to enough people over the course of the last couple of years, or last couple of tournaments rather. So yeah, just gotta get on with it, and it was fine. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a great event. I had a good time playing it, and you know, learned a lot of lessons in advance of going to the Grand Tournament Finals in a few more weeks, and hopefully coming home with the Grand Tournament Trophy, which I don't think I'll win. But then I didn't think I'd win Heat 3, so you never know, right? Doing it for the boys. Boys.
Given the current state of the game as it is, do you feel confident about the final?
I reckon that's a topic for another episode, but no is the answer in short. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's 120 it's 120 players who all qualified in their respective heats, so they've got to be good. So there shouldn't be any easy games, and there won't be any easy games. So, you know, I mean, my normal situation whenever I've done these things is I do okay, but, you know, doing okay and winning are two very different things. And I think one of the biggest issues I'm going to have is that I've settled on this Elder Flyer, Elder Jet Bike army list that I thought I was being really clever when coming up with, but it's been exposed, but I have to sort of double down on it because it's the army that I wrote for the event, and I don't really have enough time to change it. So, yeah, I've just gotta hope that no one finds a really, really good counter to that, and hope that I perform well with it. And that's it, really. I that's all I can do is turn up, try my best, and hope for the best. But I think, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how all that goes. So yes, I look forward to that in the future.
Anyway, that is in the future, and this is now. And as the event has been, it was enjoyable. I'd say for all of us, it's nice when we all get to go to an event together, instead of like one or two of us. Much like Heat 3 when we all went, and we all got to spend time and get out. Maybe we'll have to ask the audience on this one. We should get some merch. She'll wear some really cheesy T-shirts and big hats. I think that's the way forward for Lookout, sir.
I would appreciate if the audience said no to that.
Oh.
Maybe Joe can just wear his own, and it's branded the Joe Show.
Never the Joe Show on the back. Never again.
Never again.
One and done. The Joe
I'll get
Show.
that out of pity.
There you go.
In
There
the
you go.
future.
Shall we move on, Joe?
Yeah. We shall. And I'm going to try and get this right the first time, so when this inevitably stops and we have a little talk before the next section and Dan shouts at me for getting it wrong, I'm going to guess that the next section we're talking about the new Chaos models and future releases of said Chaosness, and even the new little Primaris students as well. Am I right?
It's your show, Joe.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So, for the next section. So, in this new next section, I'm going to have to point out the fact that Tim has left us. He has not ascended to another plane. He's just gone to bed because he's a tired boy. He's got to be up early.
Exactly.
So the new section, we're going to talk about the new Primaris Marines and the new Chaos Space Marines. There is, of course, a new Cold Taker model. It's very, very pretty, but that's more AOS, and we don't need to talk about that. But we are aware that it exists. So,
what about Abaddon as well, Joe? We're going to talk about Abaddon? Abaddon?
His beautiful ankle and his claw, and was it his top knot, or was it the part of Dracnir that they showed off? Or maybe it was all four.
Who knows?
I know he was showing a bit of ankle. All Steaminks.
He's got a big ankle, I hear.
Yeah, he's gonna be a pretty boy. But until he's released, we can't really talk about it much, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Don't know that much about it, but I think that he's gonna be beautiful, and I will be getting him. Do we want to talk about Chaos Force first, or do we want to talk about the new Sneaky Marines?
You tell us, Joe. It's the Joe Show.
We'll do the Sneaky Marines because I say so.
All right.
I know I don't sound very, very straight on that, but that's what we're going. That's the one. Right. We're going to go with the new Vanguard Space Marine Librarian, who's tipping his hat and dabbing at the same time. But he's got a cool cloak on. So what can that mean? Do we reckon he's like a scout librarian?
He is very much a sneaky scout librarian with a weird medieval vibe going on with his sort of undergarments and his gloves.
It's kind of like a Templar / knight dressing gown thing going on. The stuff they used to have over their chainmail.
It's kind of the one thing I do like about the new Vanguard guys, if that's what they're called. Is that they've got the kind of camo gear on, which sort of reminds me of the sort of Rogue Trader era Space Marines, when rather than just having bright solid colours, they actually had sort of like modern day camo in a lot of the artwork and the sort of illustrated guides of all the chapters. So it sort of reminds me of that, but it's done in a very sort of almost modern Tau-esque way with geometric patterns, which I like. I think it's kind of like a cool thing.
It is a beautifully painted model, that much is certain. I think it's funny seeing all the memes that have done the rounds about this 8-foot tall super soldier clad in blue armor that believes himself able to conceal himself because he's put a rag over himself at the same time, and is carrying a glowing sword. It's probably not really the most appropriate, creature or thing within the 41st millennia that would attempt to remain a secret, but I love the sculpt. I think it was one of those things that when I first saw it, I was really, really initially very excited about it. I thought maybe this could have been Primaris Ezekiel, but then obviously it became quite obvious that it's not Primaris Ezekiel. It's a generic Space Marine. Maybe once upon a time it was Primaris Ezekiel, but that hasn't obviously come to pass. I think it's really gorgeous. The medieval kind of like clothing scenario that you reference, I'm guessing that obviously that's being used to kind of, clad the cloak together around his torso. So I guess he's obviously got something that he's wearing over the top of his armor. And also the gloves were quite commonplace with the Chaos Space Marine kits. A lot of Chaos Space Marines in their old Mark III, Mark IV armor sets all had glove type details added to them, so it's not too ridiculous to see gloves on a Space Marine in power armor.
Well, this just gives more fuel to the fire that this was once a Dark Angel model that they've just then changed into something else.
Why? Because Dark Angels are heretical and chaotic.
Well, yeah, that was my point, yeah.
Well, I think you could easily convert him into a Primaris Ezekiel, because Ezekiel's essentially, he's got like Primaris-esque stats anyway. So, and a lot of people just do a Primaris version now. They just convert the stuff up. All you'd have to do is change the the lower half of the legs into normal Primaris Marine bits and do a head swap, and you're sorted.
I don't even think you need to go that far. I just think you need to paint him green. I mean, the only other thing you might want to add to him is a book, because that's Ezekiel's thing. He's got the book of, let's say the book of Ezekiel, I can't remember, the book of Logar, I don't know, whoever it is, but he's got a book that allows, well, it used to give him +1 attack. It might still give him +1 attack. I can't remember. But yeah, Ezekiel's a cool thing, and it's good to see him, not him, but see a Primaris Marine that's inspired by something like that. I mean, I've always been a fan of Space Marines in cloaks, which is why I always liked the Dark Angels. So to see that, I mean, I'm definitely going to buy this thing. It's definitely going to go into my army, whether he's good or bad, because I just think it's a really gorgeous model. I dare say we're going to see these guys getting access to some kind of infiltrate rule, or this guy getting access to some sort of infiltrate rule, and I dare say he's probably going to have the camo cloak special rule of +2 to his saves when in cover. So he could be really interesting. That lighter pattern of power armor has already been noted to have a 3+ save anyway, because the Reavers have the exact same pattern and they have a 3+ save, so it's not really going to make...
Do we reckon he'll only have 2 wounds or 3 wounds, so he'll be a lot cheaper version?
No, I reckon he'll be regular Primaris Librarian stats. He'll just have a bunch of camo cloak rules and other things. I think he'll probably be more expensive than the standard Primaris Librarian, but he'll be better for it, because you can infiltrate him and get better cover saves and do all sorts of shenanigans. I mean, let's put it this way. To have a Space Marine that could use potentially the Scout rules and be a Librarian is massive for Space Marines, because what that means is they can shut down early doors a lot of the Elder Psychic shenanigans, because you can literally go, and here's this guy within 9 of your deployment zone, which is almost certainly going to be within 24 inches of your Librarians, and if you're within 12 inches of me, I get +1 to my deny rolls because Psychic Hood. Yeah! So I think it's going to be super interesting to see what this will do to those Elder players who are relying on their jetbike squads, or Shining Spear jetbike squads, moving and then moving again. So, interesting.
Cool. And I reckon we'll see them as a lot of Raven Guard ones, so you get the negative to hit as well, so they're proper stealthy and difficult to shift. And then we've got to go along with this Librarian man of sneakiness, we've got the new Eliminator Primaris Marines, who basically seem to be sniper reavers, which I think a lot of people wanted in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, again, really like the initial look of them. I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the new kind of like mouthpiece grills these guys have. In honesty, I'm really annoyed that we have so drastically moved away from the iconic Space Marine helmet, because, you know, the Primaris helmet, although it is objectively cool in its own way, it's not a Space Marine helmet. It doesn't have that same kind of triangular, you know, face grid, or I can't think of the word.
I think when Calf came out, I think Games Workshop went, everyone likes Mark IV helmets because they're cool. And they're kind of like beakies, but better, and all snouty. And I think everyone's gone, well, those are around during the Heresy, and that's when Gilliman got Belisarius Cool to start building these guys. So he just basically took the Mark IV helmet and just made it slightly bigger.
Potentially, yeah. But regardless of all that, I think the models look great. I think you're gonna see these guys fulfill the Sniper Scout role, which again is interesting for the continuation of Primaris, because again, one of the things I really liked about the traditional Space Marine is their recruitment system and how they would take a scout and train them on the battlefield, and these scouts would have the stature of a Space Marine, the body of a Space Marine, but they wouldn't have the expertise and the way that they sort of train them up. And they would have different war gear and have to master different kind of techniques that were vital to the overall battlefield performance of Space Marines. This is interesting because, again, it builds into that lore where it's like, well, okay, cool, within the new Primaris range, which I'm sure will inevitably replace the existing Space Marine range, as everyone surely is. It's interesting that these guys are kind of coming in as full-blown Space Marines in full-blown Space Marine armor, even though I appreciate it's a different pattern to the Mark 10 or whatever it is the Primaris Marines wear. But yeah, it's fine. I think, look, at the end of the day, these guys are going to have lots of great sniper shots. They're going to be harder to kill than your regular scouts, and they're going to have probably more or similar options. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how ridiculous they are. I imagine we might see something similar to what we were talking about earlier with the Genestealer Cult guy, where they might have like D3 damage rather than just 1. And they almost certainly will have -1 on these snipers because, again, it's a Primaris Marine, so they always just do that because they've always got to just do 1 better than what the regular Marines get. So, yeah, I would imagine we're probably looking at a -1 AP, D3 damage, strength 4, range 36 sniper rifle there, in the same way as what we saw for that character in the GSC. But that's speculation. We'll wait and see, I guess. What do you reckon, Phil?
Well, I really like the models. I think they look cool. It's sort of interesting that up until now, all the Primaris, not necessarily the models, because you've got things like characters, but the individual units, they've all been very distinct and separate from the existing regular Space Marine range. Whereas these look and feel like they are doing the job of scouts, and effectively feel like they're the replacement of scouts. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case. It'd be interesting to see. But this feels like this is the first unit where the intention of, if the GW's intention is, yeah, we're going to phase out regular Space Marines. Like, up until now, you could always say, oh, they go side by side. And that's sort of what they have been saying. And the implication I always got from Games Workshop was that they're meant to be two sort of distinctly different armies. Whereas this feels like, oh, actually, we are going to replace scouts because we've got Primaris scouts now. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what the rules are for these guys, to see how they do differ. Or if they do genuinely fill a different role from standard Space Marine scouts.
I'm fairly confident they'll be exactly the same in their role, with shorter range, more wounds, and more damage, is what I would imagine. Because that tends to be the rule of thumb with the Primaris stuff, is make it harder to kill, better at shooting, and just better overall, isn't it? So I think, yeah, I genuinely suspect we'll see these guys' guns being much better. And they'll probably be relatively equal in points as well. Okay, fair enough, maybe you only get 3 in a unit for 80 point, not 80 points, maybe say 70 points or 65 points. But I reckon it'll look comparable to a scout squad, I bet.
Because you've also got, so the Reavers are the sort of the original infiltrating type unit, and they sort of say on this, these guys, the Vanguard Space Marines, are, covert operations, ruthless killers that operate behind enemy lines, saboteurs, assassins, and infiltrators. And I read that going, but isn't that Reavers? So it'd be interesting to see how are they going to tie the Reaver range into these guys, so they are sort of a specific detachment type of the Primaris Marines.
Who knows?
I can see this range being, we talked about it before, a bit like the Age of Sigmar, like the chambers. So every year in Age of Sigmar, effectively you have a new chamber of Stormcast Eternals, which gives you a different range of models. And the last set was all, the magic ones, and the year before it was all the sort of scout guys. So I'm wondering if that's how they're going to go about doing the Primaris range. Each year will be more Marines, and they will focus on a specific style of fighting.
Ironically, the new range of Stormcast they released also got released with cloaks and capes.
Clearly, that's going around as a thing in the office of Game Touch HQ.
But yeah, I think points-wise, which Dan raised would be quite interesting because I can't remember how many points they are now. I know Primaris, a squad of normal 5 intercessors have gone down, but before, 5 Space Marine Scout Snipers with camo cloak were the exact same points as 5 intercessors. So, could these potentially end up coming out at the exact same points?
Well, a unit of 5 scouts now with sniper rifles and camo cloaks coming at 80. I think you'll see these guys come in at 65 for a 3-man unit, is what I would guess. Again, that's pure speculation on my part, but I think you're probably talking, well, maybe probably 60. Make them 20 points a model because of the fact that war gear is pretty reasonable. And then, yeah, they'll probably end up something like that. Again, to suggest that I want to sort of stoke the fires of GW are doing away with the regular Space Marines and all that stuff isn't necessarily true, but based on what I've heard, the standard tactical squad box and assault marine box, which have always been part of GW's core range in independent stockists, has since been discontinued as part of their core range. Obviously, they're not discontinued in terms of the fact they're still manufacturing and selling them, but the tactical and assault marine is no longer a requirement for you to stock if you are a independent stockist of Warhammer 40,000 or Games Workshop in general. So, you know, that tells you in a relative statement of intent where we're headed, but we all knew that anyway. I think anyone who sort of was pretending that they felt like they were going to still support Space Marines were deluding themselves, because, you know, we all knew on a long enough timeline that they would still sell regular Marines, but they wouldn't be their poster child anymore. It's very much the Primaris Marines, which will almost inevitably hit a point where they go, all Space Marines have updated to Primaris Marines now, get over it. Is probably going to be where we end up in like 5 years or 4 years or whenever, however long it takes. But it'll come.
They've said with this new box set that all models that are coming out are brand new models. There's no copies. And we're going to talk about what the Chaos side is going to be in that box, in the new Storm Spear, what it's called.
Yep.
The new Storm Spear box set. So we've only found out 2 Space Marine units from that, and they are seriously outgunned.
Maybe we should talk about those Chaos Space Marine units, Joe.
Yeah, so we will do. We'll talk about the new Space Marines. So, obviously, we already know about Tim the Sorcerer.
Not Tim, the guy that went to bed.
Not Tim that went to bed. No.
Why do we call him Tim the Sorcerer, Joe? What's that all about?
So the joke is that we call him Tim the Sorcerer because he looks like Tim the Sorcerer from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Ah, it is all now clear.
If you pause the podcast now, go away, watch all of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because it is a great film, or just fast forward to the end, because that's where he appears. Spoiler alert. And then be like, oh yeah, they look the same. And then come back and then continue to listen to this podcast. I'll give you 2 seconds. 1, 2. Okay, welcome back. Now you know. But his proper job, and his proper name, is Master of Possessions. So
Master of Possessions or Master of Possession?
Possessions. So he possesses things and possesses things.
Oh, so I see. So he's not in charge of like the lost and found.
Well, he could be. Like, he's got a lot of stuff all over him.
Yeah.
He's a busy model. So those trinkets and stuff, he's like, oh, someone's lost a tooth.
There you go.
I'll hold on to that, and I'll give it back to them later.
Did we talk about Tim in a previous episode? I feel like we did.
We were like, there's a model coming out. We don't know what he does or who he is, but he's coming out. And that's about as much airtime as he got.
There you go.
But
should I give an opinion on Tim, or should we move on from him?
I'll quickly say, I actually quite like the model. I think I think he'll look good, given the current look and the aesthetic of the new army. Yeah, I quite like him. What do you think?
I think his staff arm needs some attention. I don't like the relative sort of static nature of it, and I really don't like the top of the staff. I also think the model lacks stature, so the weird kind of he's floating on his robes thing to kind of, I suppose, illustrate some form of dark magic in effect is whatever, but I think the problem is with the way the model appears in pictures, he looks, minuscule in terms of his sort of stature, and I think as it stands, unless he is actually in reality a much bulkier looking miniature on the tabletop, I think he's not going to necessarily look as imposing as you'd hope he would. And a lot of the little details don't really work for me. I think his skull mask doesn't look as cool as I would like it to. I think the top of his staff, as I've already said, looks a little bit chunky and a little bit stupid. And I think the relative static nature of his arm combined with his weird floaty pose that he doesn't really look very comfortable in doesn't do him any favours. So if I was a Black Legion player at this moment in time, neither of the two new exclusive Black Legion characters would be doing anything for me, which I could speculate doesn't necessarily bode well for Abaddon, but based on the little things I've seen of it, I'm fairly sure Games Workshop wouldn't muck up Abaddon, but these two...
You'd hope.
Hmm?
You'd hope not.
I hope not, but based on this guy, no, I don't like him. I think the problem is they just put too much stuff on him. I think they've just gone, oh yeah, great, give him like a burning skull. Yeah, but you want to just give him one? Nah, go on, give him 4, whatever. Like, it's all right, it's fine. I mean, look, I'm sure the model in reality will look fine, but based on that picture, I'm not sold.
Yeah. Okay then. What about you, Phil? Do you like him?
Yeah, so as a counterpoint to Dan's, I think he's talking rubbish, and it's a great model.
Oh my god.
I think the only thing that's a bit odd is, like I said, it took me ages to notice that he's actually floating in the air. I sort of thought he was just sort of striding forwards and had his leg up, but when you look closer, you go, oh, he is floating. I mean, that's a little bit odd, but otherwise I do really like it. And as with all the Chaos stuff, yeah, there's probably a little bit too much stuff on them, but, you know, you can take a pair of clippers to them if you really don't like certain detail. But otherwise, I think he's cool.
Nice.
You won't need to take a pair of clippers to him. It'll all fall off after one trip of the carry case.
It
will, won't it? It's. I mean, I think if you reposed him, so took his torso and then put him on, planted him on the ground, so took, I don't know, there must be another appropriate set of legs from the new Chaos Space Marines that we're going to talk about in a moment that you could probably mount him on, and he might actually start to be alright, and then chop his arm off and replace his horrible staff with something, and he might actually start to come together. But anyway, I'm sorry I don't like it for the people that do like it. It's just not for me. Moving on.
So yeah, and then underneath we teased three new Chaos Space Marine models. Finally, after 15 years, they're being replaced. And they are pretty boys. I do like them. I actually think they look better than the 3 that got released in Blackstone.
2, you mean? Well, no, you mean the Sergeant as well, yeah, or the Champion.
Well, you had the Lord.
Yes, the Lord. Sorry.
The two Boggo guys, and I've been painting the 2 basic guys, or all 3, trying to get a color scheme nailed down, and the pose they're in Blackstone, they're very like squished together and quite chubby. It makes them look a bit fat, but the models they're showing off here are very fluid and actually look like they've got a bit of height and stature to them. So I'm actually really looking forward to them because I think they're going to be a beautiful range.
What do you think, Phil? Rather than having me kick off with my opinions first.
Yeah, I do like them. I actually prefer the Blackstone Fortress 3. I thought the Champion was absolutely fantastic. Whereas this guy, I'm not massively keen on his weird sort of gribbly teeth mask that he's got on. But other than that, I think they're pretty cool. I do think that they're going to end up, once we see a whole range of these, going to be pretty fantastic.
I personally am really excited for the potential that these 3 models show. I think the far left one has some features that I probably wouldn't try and sculpt into my own. Not that I sculpt them, but assemble into my own. I think when you've got the regular bolter guy, the way they've laid him out. He looks a little static in that image, but obviously it's a multi-part kit, so that's one version of infinite possibilities. Well, not infinite possibilities, but lots of possibilities. The far right guy, again with the chainsaw and bolt pistol, shows great potential. I love the chunkiness of his bolt pistol. I think that's actually one of the nicest looking bolt pistols I've seen in a while, because it feels quite robust, I suppose. But ultimately, again, shows great potential, looks really good, and I think the guy in the middle, again, is the relative icing on the cake here as a champion model. I think, again, the flexibility that is on display here, I'm really excited to see when people start mixing this kit with the Blood Warriors from Age of Sigmar, because I think once you start factoring in some of the kit bashing capabilities for this, I think you're going to have an absolutely incredible wealth of opportunities. So I've already kind of started thinking that if I was to revisit my Chaos Space Marines, that this kit combined with some Blood Warriors from the Age of Sigmar range could probably make some utterly gorgeous Berserker models. So yeah, no, I mean this is a really, really great step forwards for Chaos Space Marines, who have been wallowing in old model syndrome for the last 10 years. Let's be honest, it's been a long time since the Chaos Space Marines really saw any TLC in terms of their core range, and I'm super happy that at long last we're starting to see some really badass Chaos Space Marine models again. Also as well, what I love about this is the fact that again, it really illustrates the excesses and the personal kind of Baroque style of the Chaos Space Marine versus the more kind of high sci-fi Primaris Marine. I think this is very much the personal glories, the champions, the individuality, the excessive chaos, the sense of personal glory, as opposed to the Space Marines' sense of loyalty and duty. I think it expresses everything that there is in the way of differences between Chaos Space Marines and regular Space Marines, and I'm super in favour of that. I think it looks really strong. Thumbs up from me.
Yeah, these are blatantly legionnaires that went into the warp 10,000 years ago, and now they're coming out and showing off what's happened to them, whilst they've been in the warp, and how their armor's changed. And just like the detail is so much more crisp. Like if you look at the old Chaos Space Marine models now, like the basic 10-man squad, like the molding on them is so bad. Like where you've got all the detailing, like outer armor bits, sometimes they literally just like slope into the armor, and there's no like defining lines. And these are just beautiful, and I think they'll match up quite nicely with things like Raptors. Like the kits look like they're going to be able to fit together quite nicely. There's not going to be much like differentials in the parts. And also that chain axe is beautiful that he's holding. I think in the codex, my codex is nearby. I'm pretty sure only the champion can take a chain axe. Part of me really hopes that you might get 10, so you can just make berserkers. But if not, it shows a good future for the possibility of Khorne players as well. Yeah, and then to follow them on, these beautiful models, you've got the next new controversial models. I already know Dan's feelings on this. The new Obliterator. We've only got the picture of the one. I'm hoping they come in a squad of 3, because that's all you can field them in. No more, no less. So, Phil, how do you feel about the new Obliterator?
Well, I'm probably going to do Dan now and basically say, I hate it. I'm really not a fan of it. It's sort of scaled very odd. I don't know if it's just a pose or it's the very overly pink sort of flesh, which makes it look a bit cartoony, but it's sort of like supersized. So it sort of reminds me of the Incredible Hulk, basically, because you've got all the muscles crossed with Bane with the mask. And I think the one problem that I've always had with Chaos, the thing that I don't like about them, is the sort of the body horror aspect, where it's the fusion of the flesh with the metal. It never looks good. And it's like the same reason why I don't like Hell Brutes or anything like that. It's like I don't know, it just can't be conveyed correctly in plastic, and it just doesn't look right. It's cool. I mean, it's an improvement on what they had before, and you can see a lot of design cue similarities with things like the Hell Brute, with like the weird teeth going around the face and stuff. But I'm just not a huge fan of it. That's it, really.
So I suppose I'll jump in here. So, first of all, I echo Phil's sentiment. This model is awful. It's awful for a lot of different reasons, and Phil's kind of addressed all of them, but well, not all of them necessarily, but the most important ones. But really, I think it represents a really negative change for what Chaos could potentially represent. One of the things I like about the origins of Chaos and the implementation of Chaos within the Space Marine range is the kind of more fantastical fantasy elements that it could operate. What I liked about the idea of the Obliterators, even though they weren't very well realised in their last couple models, is the idea that they're these shifting, mutated hulks of machine and demon merged into one entity. And I like the idea that they were these shifting shapes that could ultimately mimic the effectiveness of any weapon within the world of Warhammer 40,000. So, you know, the idea being that this demon beast could kind of reform its body potentially into some kind of, you know, laser-focused pyramid-type shape, and then, you know, shoot out a burst of energy that replicated the effectiveness of a las cannon, or potentially kind of turned itself into some other kind of obscure shape to, you know, have the same kind of profile of an assault cannon. I felt like that was a really interesting idea, that they're not necessarily just using those weapons, that they are becoming variants thereof, and I thought that that was a really interesting piece of lore that the old models, even the original kind of metal models, somewhat instilled. I mean, if you went back all the ways and looked at the very original Obliterator kits, they were just covered in all these crazy shapes and were made up of lots and lots and lots of gun barrels and lots of these different elements, and I felt like that was always interesting, because the idea isn't necessarily that you're witnessing them in one of their final forms, but in their kind of transitional, kind of primordial soup, if you will, form, where they were taking shapes and doing things. And the same thing is true of the re-release, or the second version of them, where they've got these, like, you know, this sort of flesh that's kind of going all over them, but then the weapons themselves are kind of all spewing out of their hands. So what's interesting for this more than anything is it looks like they've almost adopted the Tau-style hardpoint system. So they've gone, on their shoulders you can put 2 different types of gun, and on their arms you can put 2 different types of gun. So I just think we're going to be now dealing with a Chaos Space Marine Centurion. The problem being that that Centurions are rubbish, and I can only see these being rubbish as well. So not only are they awful models, I don't think anyone's going to want to play them, because I bet they're awful. And that's really my closing thoughts on it. I think there's nothing redeeming about it whatsoever. I mean, again, if I see them in reality and get used to seeing them, maybe over time I'll start to accept them. But I mean, talk about missing the mark with these things. They're bad. Like, I can't say any more than that.
I wouldn't be surprised because looking at them, it's like they do look like you were talking about the mutation angle. It's like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's still a thing, because if you actually look closely on the fists, they're not actually mounted to the fists. They're actually bursting through the armor plate, and they're still attached to the flesh of the wrists. So it might be that they, in the rules, you can change them up to whatever weapon you want, but from a purely game aspect, in terms of WYSIWYG, maybe you do have to just choose which ones you want to arm them with before the game. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know enough about the process to understand what goes into making and designing these types of models, so I won't be unfair to whoever put this together, because I imagine whoever put this together was up against a heck of a deadline, was told that they had to look at obliterators, and were to use Centurions as a base. Because when you look at this model, it has so much of the Centurion DNA in it. Its pose, its stature, even its feet. I mean, they've literally now got the Centurion feet on the thing, and the Centurion shoulder pads. So it clearly now is a mutated Centurion, as opposed to what it was before, which was something else entirely. And that is the thing. That's what concerns me about this, and when I look at it, and why I think they're going to change the rules of it. I think if they had the time, if people have thought about it, if people even thought this was going to be something interesting, I think we would have seen something quite different, because when Games Workshop want to do it, they make gorgeous sculpts. I just think this probably got given to someone's on their 4th, 5th week in the job, and they were told, this is Centurion, chaos it, and it looks lazy, is all I'm saying.
I personally don't think they're going to change the rules for them, because of the random nature of the rules they've already got. So you have to roll to see what their strength is, what their AP is, what their damage. So I think that will then represent the random guns that are stuck all over it. Personally, I think the paint job doesn't help this model. I think because when they talk about the obliterated in the lore, they're a constantly shifting metal skin, and like they're always changing and absorbing stuff. So, like, it wouldn't have a pinky flesh-colored skin. It would be silver or a very dark black. Not what we're seeing here. So
I will bet a shiny penny, a pound coin, Joe, with you, they will change these rules. So take the Centurion rules, change the weapons, make it chaos. They're not going to do obliterates the same ever again. This is going to be...
Well, because it means they're going to have to change the whole Chaos Codex then.
Yeah, but they are. Like, there's no way that thing isn't getting new rules.
I don't know. Because Khan was in 7th edition, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The bastard Khan.
Yeah. And even if they didn't change Khan's rules in 7th edition, but yeah, look, this is a totally different unit from what we've had up to this point. They'll change it. In an attempt to make it better, they will make it worse. Or in fact, in an attempt to make it better, they have made it worse. It's a regression for the obliterators. It's turned them from an interesting unit with an interesting, unique heritage into chaotic Centurions, which is lame.
Yeah. I hope not, because I was kind of hoping of being able to get some and do an obliterator bomb. I hope that doesn't go away.
Well, it will. So there we go.
Oh, I am. And then, after those controversial words, to what I feel is a really beautiful demon engine, the Venom Crawler, which is a giant angry spider tank, and I personally really, really like it. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I like it too. It's good. I think
you like it too.
Yeah, I do. I think
you're going to go the other way.
No. I like it. I like various elements of it. I think it reminds me a lot of Neon Genesis Evangelion, where Eva Unit 2 goes into its berserk form. In fact, actually, I think in the third of the remake movies, Evangelion 3.33333, whatever it was called, there was a point where Evangelion Unit 2 had to go into like beast form, where essentially all of its restraints were removed, and it turned into this lurching, terrifying kind of beast form, and that reminds me a lot of that. The face has a lot of similarities, but regardless of that, I think it's going to be a model that will look absolutely gorgeous on the tabletop. I don't think it's one that necessarily works in this photo. I think you can focus on a lot of the details and you lose a lot of the size and stature of the model, because I'm sure when you see these things for real, they'll look really impressive. And that's the main takeaway. I look at this model and I see potential, and I see something that I think will look good on the tabletop. It's not static. It's original. It's interesting. The detail isn't overly abundant on it, in the sense that they could have gone even more ridiculous with this, but they kind of towed a relative line with it. And I like the fact that Chaos are getting more demon engines that are really interesting. So, yeah, I can't wait to see what the rules are. I think it's going to be super fun. Hope they're really good, because I'd like to see lots of these, because they're good.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the face on it. I kind of feel like the face is taken straight out of Doom. From one of the big bull things that you have to fight with the two big cannons. And I love Demon Engine. I remember when 8th dropped, I was actually doing really, really well running 3 Mauler Fiends. So I think now is the time to reapproach a demon engine army for myself. So, yeah.
I look forward to buying it in the future.
It'll be beautiful as well. It'll be beautiful. It probably won't be, because you don't like my new idea for the cherry red chaos.
Oh yeah, no, I won't buy those off you. Those look awful.
Yeah. And what do you think, Phil? Not about my paint scheme, but about the tank.
Well, about the tank spider thing, I actually do really like it as well. I think it's got a lot of cool elements. Like you said, the face with the tongue and the loads of little eyes is its sort of standout feature. I like the little side sponsons are on its sort of belly stuck up in the air. I think the only thing I'm not a huge fan of is the weird tongue thing coming out of the 8-pointed star. But again, that's because I think those sort of weird body horror elements just don't look like they should. It looks like it's a modelled on bit of detail, as in like a bit of sculpted detail, as opposed to an actual living tongue sticking out, for example. And maybe the spikes on top need to be a tiny bit smaller. That's what I would do if I was going to improve it. But it's one of those things where, like I said, it's hard to take a good 3D. It's hard to take a good 2D photo of a 3D model and to really show it off. Like, the best thing you can do is see it in person and sort of hold it in your hand and move it around. So it'd be really interesting to see what this looks like in person, and also sort of how big it'll actually be, and what the rules for it will be as well.
Well, the base of it looks like the same as the Arachnarok spider. I reckon he's going to be pretty big, almost the same size as a Knight base, if not bigger.
It won't be bigger than a Knight base, Joe.
I was thinking it would be more like Rhino-sized.
Well, it's the rat, so it's like an Onaga Dune Crawler base, I reckon.
Yeah, that's good. In fact, if you look at the legs, that's a kind of a good Chaos comparison for... Yeah. It's almost like a Chaosified Dune Crawler, based on the legs. So I'm too surprised that's one of the origins of it.
Yeah. So maybe, not Knight size, so it's got a bigger footprint than a Knight, but I'd say it's about Land Raider size.
Do you think this is like potentially going to be a Defiler? Is it Defiler? One a replacement for that?
I don't think so, because the Defiler's supposed to be like the heavy hitting, like fire support tank. It looks like the pintle mats on the side are going to be for something like auto cannons, maybe. I think that's like its job. Well, even like light fire support, because it says that it's allowing demons easier access to the real space. So I think this tank's going to help with summoning, or give bonuses to units with the demon keyword. So it could be going down that route, I reckon.
I reckon it'll be super fast as well. It's got to be like 14, 16-inch move, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a really lightning fast option in your army. You combine this with some Hell Drakes and some other things, you could have some really interesting synergies with that within the Black Legion in terms of ultra aggressive demon engines. So yeah, I'm dead in favour of it. I think it's good. I wish we had more demon engines at this moment in time because I'd like to see, more Chaos Space Marines with access to that as opposed to just your traditional Rhinos, Land Raiders, Predators. Not that doesn't work in certain contexts, but it's good to expand the range of demon engines for these guys for sure.
Yeah. And and that's it for the release of that box set. So as it shows, Space Marines are very, very outgunned in this box set. So what have we got? Any guesses as to what the new Space Marine stuff's going to be?
No idea.
It'll be more of the infantry that's in the box art, and that'll probably be it.
Well, I agree with Phil. Infantry or box art.
I feel like you're going to need some heavy hitters because it's always got to be a comparative fight. So if it just goes with bolt guns and sniper rifles, they're not going to be able to deal with a big angry shooty tank and obliterators.
Well, if you go back to pretty much most of the box games where it's Chaos versus Space Marines, Chaos always has like a big dreadnought. Space Marines tend to have some Terminator-esque things, but very rarely do Space Marines have vehicles. And I know that's probably what you're angling at, but I don't think there'd be a Space Marine vehicle. Although I wouldn't be surprised if one does come out at some point this year. I think we're probably due one, but I don't think it'll be in this box because it will just make the box far too expensive for someone to buy.
Potentially.
But I have to say props to them because I've been saying it quite a lot that normally when you buy a Games Workshop box, there's a load of there's a few new models and a load of old models. So I'm really excited that they've done a box that is literally all new models. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it's a good sign for the future.
Yeah, I hope they sort of take that as a new direction they're going to be doing in the future.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, I reckon that pretty much wraps everything up, don't you, Joe? For the Joe Show?
Did you not want to talk about the Sisters of Battle model that they previewed?
Oh!
Keep scrolling down that page.
There's a Sisters of Battle model with a ridiculously huge
Reliquary.
Reliquary. So this will either be an army standard bearer or a squad upgrade, I reckon.
Oh, yeah. I think, some kind of character standard bearer.
Yeah.
Is a likely case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful model, and it's better than the metals, obviously, because they're something like 20 years old. But from the image, I'd probably go so far as it's probably one of the best 40k sculpts they've done. Like, this is on par with like the new Age of Sigmar stuff. Because the new Age of Sigmar stuff, I think, looks better than anything that's coming out in 40k.
I'd probably agree with you for a lot of the stuff. I think because that's a slightly larger scale, I think, than the 40k, so they tend to just look better and have a bit more detail in them.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely if the Obliterator is the standard that they're achieving. So anything looks better than that Obliterator. But yeah, I mean, I think again, without wanting to keep kicking the Obliterator, this shows, again, some time, effort, and energy and resource that's going into the Sisters release, or the Adeptus Sororitas, or whatever they're supposed to be called. But yeah, I mean, it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be a beautiful range, and I think you're going to see a lot of Sisters added to a lot of Imperial forces based on the sculpts. Beta rules maybe not so much, but again, those will only get better you'll be kidding yourself if Sisters of Battle are not a home run in terms of overall quality. So yeah, no, really, really excited about that, and that looks great. So yeah, win-win.
It's all coming at Millhouse.
Absolutely. If I can talk for just a moment longer on it, the thing I kind of like the most about it is that the standard itself is on kind of a really tatty old piece of timber or like pole, and I actually really like that because it's nice juxtaposition to the Marines in the sense that the Marines have all the kind of like slick metal stuff, whereas these guys have these old relics that are clearly based off of old stuff, and I kind of like just that little detail goes a long way into making this model look really, really unique. That it's carrying, a staff that's made out of a tatty old piece of wood is a little detail that goes a long way. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. So that rounds up the end of the Joe Show. Sad times. Sad times.
Would you say it's been everything you hoped it would be and more, Joe?
Everything and more. And I think for you guys, glaring disappointment. But
I don't think that's true. What would you say, Phil?
It's gotten better as we've gone along.
Maybe we'll revisit the format in a few months' time. But for now, any closing thoughts, Joe, for the Joe Show?
The Joe Show. It was fun whilst it lasted, and I hope everyone enjoyed thinking, talking, and just generally basking in me.
I mean, if nothing else, I appreciated the fact that you were interrupting yourself with rustling around and, cleaning your brushes. I think at one point you started talking, and all I could hear as you were doing it was like stuff in the background, which was great.
Well, I've got to keep it up, you see. So, it would be unfair.
You really don't.
I really don't. It'd be unfair for me to interrupt everyone else with this sound, and
That's
not
strange,
myself.
Joe. How are you able to perfectly replicate the sounds you don't make?
Because I'm basically that guy from Police Academy
Oh, really?
who make noises with his mouth.
He was also in
But
Spaceballs, wasn't he?
Yeah, but only hobby-related ones, and sat at a desk.
There you go. Magical times.
Yeah.
Well, take us home, Joe. Say thank you and goodbye and so on.
Thank you, goodbye, and so on.
I was expecting something a bit more heartfelt, but that'll do.
I could do a film quote. I'm too drunk to taste this chicken.
Great.